Finance and Operations Committee, December 14th, 2017. Our first item of business is administrative cost definition and benchmarking. I'm going to ask Associate Vice President Julie Tonneson to come up and talk to us. And whenever you're ready, Brian Brandt?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the committee. This marks the 6th year in which we've been reporting the results of the administrative cost benchmarking analysis to the board. Up until this year, and with the reorganization of the board, it has been presented historically to just the Finance Committee. So because new members will be reviewing the results for the first time this year, the docket summary and some of our comments today will backtrack a bit and give some background to explain the purpose and the basic outline of this analysis, focusing on the results for fiscal year 17 while doing so. We will also be commenting on the last 3 years of comparable data so you can see some trends and touch on some lessons learned and an assessment of a few outcomes attached to this analysis. This analysis grew from a desire to benchmark administrative costs, which we will talk more about, but it has added value beyond that in teaching us more about our overall expenditures. Associate VP Julie Tonneson will walk you through the latest version of the analysis, but before she does, I want to commend her and her team. This is not easy work, and it provides critical information to the university that isn't readily available to most other institutions. So we're extremely fortunate to have Julie and her team with this detailed work, and with that, turn it over to Associate Vice President John Tonneson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. The original goals of this analysis were actually not that many. There were few. The intent was to create a new way of viewing expenditures and a shared way of understanding them and talking about them on campus. Additionally, we hope to uncover ways in which things were being recorded differently across units that could be and should be made consistent. And in categorizing the expenditures, we could track them over time and build benchmarks that we could manage to. I want to add just a few notes for context about the analysis here. The impetus, as Senior Vice President Burnett said, for creating this analysis was really a desire to define administrative costs. You may remember at the time it was FY10 through FY12. There was some critical press about the university and the level of administrative cost here compared to other institutions. But we learned very quickly that when you ask a group of people what does administration mean, no one had the same answer. So we decided that in order to be able to track this and benchmark against it, we had to first define it. So what you see here, and that we'll explain today, was our attempt to do so, and we have maintained that for 6 years. A second note, the total expenditure results you see here will not equal what you see on the financial statements, and that's primarily because this analysis does not factor in some of the accounting entries for accruals and deferrals and depreciation that are done at the very highest level of the institution. This really reflects what you could quote call regular expenditures occurring in the units. Third, this analysis cannot be compared to what is or isn't happening at other institutions. We know very few places that delve into it in this way, and some are beginning to, but they will be different because we do rely on some of the unique aspects of our system and our data to pull this together. And finally, you can't compare what you see today with the same report that we delivered last year due to changes in methodology. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. So how is this analysis best described? When we were developing it, we met with many different people and consulted along the way in order to categorize our expenditures in ways that people thought was reasonable. And we ended up with the following 3 buckets. First, direct mission delivery for the costs of those people that actually do the instruction, research, and public service, as well as the support costs that are associated with them. Student aid is not included in the total mission delivery. It is a pulled out separate category here. The second group is mission support and facilities for the costs of those that support the mission but do not actually do mission work. This includes non-supervisory people only and their supply costs. as well as all the facility costs of the institution are in this category, and some things that people don't automatically think of as being associated with employees. Things like study abroad fees that we pay to other institutions, or royalty payments that we have to pay to inventors and so forth. Those are included in this second category. The third category is leadership and oversight, and that's for those that have leadership or management roles at the institution, so supervisors, regardless of where they exist in the units. We use job codes and expenditure coding in the financial system by function and by object code to get the results. I'm not going to go through the methodology in detail, but if you have questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them at another time. And a final note here is to make the point that mission does not just happen in academic units, and administration does not just happen in support units. And further, all of these categories are supported by multiple funding sources. So there is no direct link in this analysis between a category and a type of unit, or a category and a type of revenue. There is a detailed chart on page 6 of your docket materials that provides examples of expenditures in each of these categories, but we'll talk through each of the 3 main ones just in summary form here. And what you see for direct mission here are examples of positions that are included in this category. Not surprisingly, it includes all of our instructional staff, so faculty, clinical professors, instructors, etc., extension educators doing public service, all the health science professionals that are directly providing service, so nurses, physicians, veterinarians, and so forth, scientists and lab techs that are working in the labs, and we have students that are directly delivering instruction, research, and public service as part of their graduate assistant role. In addition, the support costs or other purchases here that are coded as instruction, research, or public service in the system. Direct mission delivery, as defined here, represents close to half the university's total expenditures, 47.6% of that total in FY17. As I mentioned, we don't have a separate slide on the student aid component, but I just want to say really quickly that the number that you see on the materials associated with student aid is not only the institutional financial aid such as Promise, but it includes the federal Pell grants, it includes the SEOG grants, and the state grant funding as well. So it's a large number. We have identified that as a separate pull-out piece, not directly included in the mission totals. For the second category, there are a variety of job code families represented in mission support and facilities, and these again are non-supervisory costs. But this is where you'll find the basic support functions of finance, HR, technology, clerical. We also have some interesting titles that are unique to universities, perhaps. We have librarians and coaches. We have the captain of a ship and so forth. There are also nondescript positions here, so coordinators. We have analysts, project specialists, and all of the operations personnel. Quite a mix here for police, cooks, cashiers, custodians. Those are all in this category as well. And finally, this year we have incorporated the spending for temporary and casual employees. For the first time, we've included them here in this category in it as well. In the non-personnel grouping, there are really 3 types to be aware of. In this group, there is the regular support costs, that go along with the people, so that's things like travel and supplies and equipment. But second, all of the facility costs here related to ongoing facility operations, utilities, rent, repair and maintenance spending, and so forth. And finally, based on Regent feedback beginning just this year, we added the university's contributions to capital projects. So that's direct spending on the projects as well as debt service in support of them. They are included in this category. For FY17, the total spending for all of these activities was 36% of our overall expenditures. And finally, turning to leadership and oversight, which was 8.2% of our total expenditures in FY17, this is where all the supervisors, managers, and leader expenses fall. So program directors, departmental chairs, college deans, campus chancellors, vice presidents, and so forth. A summary then of the dollars and percents for FY17 is shown here. The details, or more details, are shown on page 9 of your docket materials. But for FY17, total spending, given the exclusions that are a part of this analysis, was $3.5 billion, with roughly 56% of that in direct support of mission and student aid. 36%, as I mentioned, for mission support and facilities, and 8.2% for leadership and oversight. In total, 60% of the spending was for personnel, $2.1 billion, which has been consistent for many years in that 60 to 65% range. Within that, the single largest category of spending is for direct academic personnel at close to $1 billion. That would be the instructors, scientists, and researchers. The second largest category is for student workers at close to $250 million, which also is in that mission column. The most significant spending in non-personnel activities was for supplies, services, and miscellaneous costs at over $400 million. This has been true in the past years as well, and it is for generally for things like operating supplies and services, scientific services, travel, lab supplies. Really a wide variety of different purchases are included in that category. The second largest non-personnel expense was for debt service and capital project transfers at just under $150 million. Nothing in these results was surprising or represents a significant shift from prior years. You can see here on this chart we put together and made comparable the last 3 years of information. So you could see that there is really little change in terms of what each of these represents as a percent of our total spending. Personnel costs have remained very stable year to year, mostly remaining flat or changing by 0.1%. And even considering that we know non-personnel spending to be more volatile, there has been only one shift between years at over 1%, and most are significantly under that. When you roll the data up at this full university level, things tend to flatten out, and really some messages become clear. We've identified 5 significant points that we want to mention today as learnings from 6 years of reviewing this information. First, the shifts of spending between categories are small, as I just mentioned. It takes a net movement of $3.5 million to shift 0.1%. Within the docket summary, we did provide examples of changes that can and do occur from one year to the next, but there are literally thousands of those occurring each year throughout the institution, and the ways in which they offset one another will change and adjust year to year. For this reason, the second point here is also relevant. It is not possible to see the direct impact of the administrative reallocations we have been implementing in these charts. Those reallocations have served to lower the rate of growth in costs, particularly in mission support and facilities and leadership and oversight, because that's how we have defined administration. But they do not lead to a reduction in total spending. Reallocations are expense reductions, but they're used to pay for cost increases in other areas, sometimes within the same column, if you will, as part of this analysis. Third, we've learned that changes in sponsored grant funding in the level or in the way those grants are administered through subcontracts versus direct spending in the university, for example, will directly impact this analysis, and particularly the mission category. Fourth, where we have areas of growth in program, and MnDrive is a recent good example of this, the mission-related spending associated with that comes with additional support costs. And the ratios you see between the columns, between mission and mission support, apply even down at that program or initiative level. There's mission spending and support spending associated with it. And then finally, the non-personnel spending tends to have more volatility from year to year. And we've learned it's not so much in the general supplies and equipment, but more in the large ticket items, things like big equipment purchases or facility costs, real estate acquisitions, royalty payments, those kinds of things that come and go. And finally, overall, we believe that the analysis actually brings us good outcome information. There are probably a number of things we could point out, but there are 3 that I want to highlight just quickly. First, our leadership and oversight remains less than 10% of our total spending. Actually, it's just over 8%. We believe that, and the consistency of that is a good thing. We have also increased costs, increased spending on mission and support, but that ratio has remained the same. So the infrastructure costs are not overtaking our mission spending by any means. And finally, the data at this level is used by us, but the data at the unit level is used for management purposes in the unit. It's helped them to understand, monitor, and plan their spending in ways that wasn't available to them before, and it's helped us as we really think through all of our reallocation exercises every year. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will stop, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Vice President Tonneson. Nice report. Good to hear. Are there anybody that has questions about what we just discussed? Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, Vice President Tomlinson, for a very informative report and good work. And so I guess the questions I have are, first of all, is there any chance, so I'm looking for ways that this very good analysis can be used to support our ongoing productivity and efficiency initiatives, because I think that's probably a key reason for why we would want to do this. And so I guess the first question is there any way that we could package data from other institutions into comparable buckets so that we could compare ourselves across, which can always be illuminating if we could do that. And then I guess the second question really is how do you see us being able to use this data to support productivity initiatives? I think and one of the things you said is that we'll use it internally. We'll use it as an internal set of benchmarks to shape, and identify issues and opportunities functionally by department. But any chance we could somehow benchmark this data, I guess, is the question.
Vice President Tonneson.
Chair Anderson, Regent Powell, I would love to say yes to that question. We have actually, when we first started this analysis, I visited with our Big Ten colleagues on a number of occasions and asking them if there's any way that they had similar plans or similar sets of information, and I got zero back from them. I think at the time when we started, they were not, it wasn't on their consciousness to even start thinking about spending this way. I think recently there has been some interest in it, and so I will keep pushing for that. I hesitate to just take information from their websites and try to interpret it in a way that I could confidently tell you is comparable, and I'm not prepared to do that. But we'll continue to work with them and see if there's ways we can do that. In terms of using the information for productivity purposes, I think a couple of things. One is when we do the analysis and look at the information, we can dig down pretty deep into the institution. And when we see things that pop out that look different within across the units, we will investigate that to try to understand what's going on. And sometimes it is, almost always, it is explainable. But in addition to that, I will say that there are differences between the units, and that's somewhat based on the functions that they have. In terms, you can't, for example, look at this and say, well, every college should have X% in leadership and oversight or X% in support, because their missions are different. So we have to I guess we have to look at what's happening, what the results are in those units, and combine that with what we know about the unit to try to find those places where there is something going on. But beyond that, they have been using it. So it isn't unusual now for one of them to say to us, for example, well, you know that we're low in administration, and here's why, and here's what we've done, because they are tracking it this way. So I think we're starting to move that way, and we could use it more for future analysis too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Regent Paul. Regent Beeson.
Thank you. Well, it's timely. My questions, comments are really building on Regent Powell's. This does add clarity to what we had in those years, and it does tell us with, I think, certainty what our administrative costs are, and the fact that we haven't become more top-heavy since then. But but really the question is about what do and we know the data is being used for your budgeting. We know it's being used for the reallocation. We know that's being used to contribute to the $90 million in administrative cost reduction. But the question really is, what else do we do with the data? And I've got a couple of ideas, and I hope Mr. Chair and the Chair of the Board and the administration will really be proactive about trying to create some projects, some deliverables to us. One would be give us, the top, the units around the university whose numbers stand out, either positive or negative. And there may be explanations or stories, but I think we have to drill down. We have to sort of see what you're seeing, and not at a micro level, but where are the outliers for costs? And we may just conclude these are so differentiated and separate and unrelated that we can't compare one thing to another. The other project is sort of, and what jumps out is even though we've cut $90 million of administrative costs, that percent of the whole university's budget has sort of remained about even. So that tells me we're having to add new costs on, and I'm thinking that that's more compliance costs, non-productive costs. And I've asked before this board to make that study of compliance. What percentage of these costs are compliance costs? Compliance costs are non-productive. I mean, they're required, but they're non-productive. They don't add value to the deliverables that we're trying to produce. And is that becoming an increasing burden? We can't answer that question. So there are some projects that have to come out of the data that we need you to propose and we need to keep working with. The foundation is really solid, and I applaud for the work you've done.
So that's not really a question, that's a comment. I'm going to go to Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Vice President Tonneson, again, exceptional work. It keeps on getting better. I'm not sure if I asked this question in the past, but I don't remember the answer if I did. Is there a way to understand the number of employees in each of the categories? Or is it hard to count people, as half or 3/4 or whatever, fractions of people?
Vice President Tonneson.
Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu. In this analysis alone, there is no way to count a head count, a number of people. It's totally expenditure based. You'd have to, and that's over an entire year. So you would have to pick a point in time to pull head count and make some extrapolation from that compared to the year-long set of expenditures, but not from this analysis alone. We don't do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Hsu. No other questions, I think. Oh, Representative Chen, I did not see you there.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Anderson. I have a question with respect to the methodology. So first, I think this is great work. It's a new lens to look at the spending. But I wonder for the methodology, so you mentioned you changed the methodology, but when we look at the past 3 years, fiscal 15 to 17, there's a little change. Does that mean all 3 years are calculated retrospectively based on the new methodology? Yeah, that's the first question. And second one is that for this new methodology, should some roles in the mission support be in the direct mission delivery, such as advisors and librarians? I don't know how you choose one specific methodology, because this is very new work that other people do not do.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Vice President Tonneson.
Mr. Chair, members, first of all, on your first question, when we change the methodology, we go back and apply the new methodology to the prior 2 years. We don't go back the full 6 years, but we have done that for the last 3 years. So they truly are comparable using the same methodology. To your second question, in terms of how we chose which jobs fell in which category, that was part of the year-long consultative process when we developed the definitions originally. We looked at each job code and the name of that job code and a short description to try to decide where it fell, and then had many, many conversations about where some of these things should fall. And really came down to if you're doing research, instruction, or public service, that's what drove it, versus more of a support function to allow those things to happen. But you can argue about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senior Vice President Burnett, do you want to wrap up the session here?
Well, again, I want to thank Julie and her team for the work that they do on this, and to Regent Powell, your question about can we try and get peers to come with us on this. It's been my experience since joining this institution that our counterparts are more taken with some outside firms and are encouraging us to join them to get peer data. And what comes with that is a $30,000 to $50,000 annual subscription price. The beauty of this one is it's done by our staff in-house. It makes sense to us. My goal is going to be trying to sell a couple of other institutions to come with us and save the money. But at just the most recent Big Ten Business Officers meeting, we had dueling pitches from Wisconsin and Iowa to look at buying these products to do benchmarking. And I guess I'm reluctant to make that expenditure just to get that data. I think that, again, as Associate Vice President Thomason put, we've got our group internally understanding these mission versus mission support versus administration. And I think we've got a really good value piece without paying subscriptions to an outside firm to try and get there. But we're going to continue to try and see if someone wants to take the cost-effective road to peer benchmarking and see. But again, we'd be after the land grants in the Big Ten to come with us, the public land grants that would look more like us as opposed to some of the other members. So to your point, we're going to keep trying.
Thank you, Senior Vice President Burnett. I think that wraps up our presentation on the cost definition and benchmarking. We're going to move into fiscal 19 budget levers and eventually a resolution related to undergraduate, non-resident, non-reciprocity tuition rate. I'm going to ask again Senior Vice President Burnett to introduce the panel and take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This afternoon, we're going to very briefly remind everyone of the revenues included with our primary budget planning for fiscal year 19, which begins July 1 of next year. And within that, to summarize the President's recommended change in the undergrad non-resident, non-reciprocity tuition rate on the Twin Cities campus. At the end, we will remind everyone about the non-compensation expenditures included. We'll talk about that a bit. We have Vice President Brown here with us, Vice President of Human Resources, as the committee had asked to dig a little deeper into the compensation issues in this presentation this year. We'll also spend a few minutes of aspects we didn't cover in October, outlining some concepts for how expenditure changes for the institution interplay with the annual budget. And this is a conversation we had with the Finance Committee last fall. And in a few minutes, we'll spend time describing in more detail factors that go into the annual decision on compensation. We plan to leave ample time for committee discussion of these issues. So with that, I would ask Associate Vice President Julie Tonneson and Vice President Kathy Brown to walk us through the presentation before you.
Vice President Tonneson. Vice President Brown.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members, a quick reminder here on what the framework revenues are. As we've discussed on numerous occasions, budget planning at the institutional level largely focuses on the $1.5 billion in our large discretionary funds, our O&M appropriation and tuition. The revenues depicted here in red, light green, and yellow are incorporated into the budget that the President will recommend to you in May, but the planning in these funds is largely done at the unit level. They intersect with the discretionary budget framework on occasion as we work through the process, and the university helps units plan in these funds and monitors them, but the focus of the decision making is really around the appropriation and tuition. The projected changes in these revenues is supplemented in large part by an annual plan to internally reallocate resources, reducing planned recurring expenditures in order to free up resources to spend on growing costs or higher priority activities. So in a way, it's another form of a resource. For an update on our appropriations and our reallocations, very briefly, we know as of today that there will be no increase in our state appropriation for FY19. So increases in that revenue source will not be available to cover cost increases. We will plan to include some level of internal reallocation in next year's budget, however. We believe we will need to find at least $11 million in administrative cost reductions as part of this exercise in order to meet that final stretch to the $90 million goal. But it is very likely that the total planned internal reallocation will need to be higher than $11 million. It will have to exceed that in order to cover cost increases as well as to help address areas of the budget that are challenged right now with structural imbalances. We've displayed here, moving to tuition, some general tuition revenue plan equivalencies for each 1% change in the various rates. Each of these assumes stable enrollment. So it assumes the entering freshman class, for example, is the same enrollment as the exiting or graduating cohort. It also assumes the same overall student credit hours or course taking patterns as that is occurring this year. One note I want to mention for the Twin Cities non-resident non-reciprocity rate, because of the commitment to hold all continuing students to no more than a 5.5% increase, any rate increases above that will generate significantly less in revenue. And I want to note that we continually assess and refine our tuition revenue estimating models, and we have done that again just recently. I believe all of these are sound with the exception of the little asterisk. I think it's probably closer to 300,000, but we're still in the ballpark, so we'll leave it at that. Specifically related to the recommendation before you today for action, the President is recommending a 15% increase to the Twin Cities undergraduate NRNR, non-resident non-reciprocity tuition rate for incoming freshmen only. This would represent an increase of $3,748 from what the current year freshmen are paying. For all continuing cohorts, he is recommending a 5.5% increase, which varies from an increase of $1,264 for current juniors and seniors to $1,449 for current freshmen. In total, we are estimating these changes to generate $8.8 million. These changes are being recommended for action now rather than with the remainder of the budget in May and June in order to benefit the communication and recruiting process for students and families as they choose a school for next fall. We will, I am confident, talk more about this recommendation during the discussion period after the presentation. So I want to turn next quickly for a few minutes to focus on a few other things. And first, how to think about reallocations or expenditure reduction plans in the context of the annual budget. We touched on this conceptually last fall, as Senior Vice President Burnett said, with the Finance Committee. That's the fall of 2016. And I didn't want to lose it this year because I think it might be helpful as you think about the big picture budget and what you see coming forward as reallocations. But many of the reports we produce and the analysis we do, as well as many of the cost levers in the budget, are really from the perspective of object of expenditure. So when we talk about salaries or equipment or fringe benefits or utilities, that's this view. It's important. We need to understand it. We use it for planning. But often, in strategic planning around the budget, we want to talk more from a functional or programmatic view, whether it is expanding program X or eliminating program Y or improving the rank of the medical school or the library. Those are really from a functional or programmatic view of expenditures. We have to do both, and that makes thinking about cost levers just a bit more complicated, particularly when we talk about reallocation. Decisions on a larger strategic level are often not reflected well in the annual budget due to the timing of things. We might be able to talk about plans to invest new dollars over time, but in our efforts to count reallocations to balance the budget on an annual basis, on the cut side, it is harder to think about this in a multi-year framework. And I want to give you just one example. Let's say we were going to eliminate an academic program. The process from decision to full elimination may reasonably take a number of years. And the impact of that decision on expenses is often recognized in the budget over time. So, as an example, as it could play out, in year one, if you decide not to enroll additional students for that particular program, fewer students might mean less operating costs. The unit submits a reduction in operating cost expenditures as part of their reallocation plan, and we count it that year. In year 2 and or year 3 or 4, as the student numbers drop, you might get a faculty retirement that you don't replace, you might get a staff member moving to a new job, you don't fill that position, you eliminate it. In the years those expenditures drop out, we count those savings in that year to balance that budget. By the time the program is gone, in year 4 or beyond, you can finally say, we closed program Y, but we can't count any more savings because we've already counted it. And that's why the strategic cuts often do not flow nicely or directly as we would hope they would for communication purposes. We have to take a longer view and recognize that the specific actions involved in these decisions help balance the budget along the way. I don't want to leave the impression that all of our cuts are strategic in this way. Some are clearly not. They're one time, but to the extent that they are this way, it has been difficult for us to communicate it because the lists of reallocations that you get don't tell this type of story. We are working on more systematic ways to tell the story, so watch for that as a supplement to the budget in the future. One of the primary costs we need to address each year along the way is compensation, and you had specific questions about that when we talked in October. So Vice President Brown is here today to walk through some more detailed information specifically related to compensation.
Vice President Brown.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. Compensation is really a part of the employee value proposition. So the slide that you have in front of you identifies that we have differentiators as an employer that are not based on compensation, and compensation is really kind of at the base of the pyramid. This is something that can be replicated by almost any other competitor, and so what our goal is to be market competitive. The compensation alone is hardly ever the only factor that an individual will decide in either taking a job at the university or retaining a job at the university. So what we're focusing on in our discussion here today is in the foundational column at the base of the pyramid, base pay, and then in the performance-based column, merit increases. Obviously, there are other things that go into that pyramid at the bottom that we will not be focusing on today. We have several different employee groups at the university. Each employee group looks at compensation a little bit differently, but largely the same. So we have faculty, professional and administrative staff, civil service staff, labor represented, graduate assistants, and professionals in training. All of them have focuses on base pay, and they all are merit-driven compensation with the exception of our labor represented employees who do not generally have merit-based pay in their contracts, although we do have a small portion of merit-based pay in our contract for our represented faculty at the Crookston and Duluth campus. The next page indicates just the number of employees in the P&A and civil service job family groups. So one of the first steps that we did in helping us understand our compensation was to take about 40% of our employees. Our faculty job descriptions need little review, but we didn't always have good market comparisons for our P&A and civil service employees. And so we broke them into job families. The number of employees in each is here. And this helps us both know what people do, and then we have done market analysis to determine what is a good market comparison for the people we employ doing this work versus people in the greater community or other appropriate market study group. Then we make a decision what's going to be an annual compensation pool, and that's part of the budgeting process that comes to you every year. The first two bullets really look to what do we need to pay to recruit and retain talent relative to external markets in which we may be competing for employees. The bottom bullet obviously goes to what is our capacity to pay, and those factors have to be measured against each other to determine what is a reasonable compensation pool on an annual basis. The annual compensation pool is distributed at the local level, and the key for you to understand is that a 2% compensation pool does not equate with a 2% across the board increase to every employee and every employee group. So we have a pool of money that is allocated at the local level based on merit, and those ranges may be 0 to 4%. Occasionally it may be higher if there's approved market adjustment where we've identified a group of employees that are substantially below their market and need some adjustment. We may add a small pool of money to help that group get to a competitive market position. Obviously, our labor agreements determine how that compensation pool is distributed for the labor represented employees. Again, 2% in the pool does not equate to a 2% across the board for all employees. So just to give you an idea of how we use the job family data to help us distribute the money, this is a finance job family. These are on the left side of this is the titles that we use, and current midpoint in the ranges. What we've discovered, and we're really moving to the next step in the job family work, is if you take a professional 2 supervisor and professional 2 independent contributor, which are highlighted in gold, the average there is 58,999,000, or the midpoint for that range. What we learned is there's actually different types of work being done in a finance professional 2 job class, and the future state is down at the bottom, where we would determine that some people are doing accounts receivable, some people are doing cost accounting, some people are doing financial planning and analysis. All 3 of those subspecialties, if you will, in a professional 2 range of work have different markets. And by breaking this down, we can determine what is the appropriate midpoint for the work being done. The first cut at this was a good pass at getting a much more informed market than we had previously been using. This is now a second pass that will not change anybody's job description, will not change their work, will not necessarily result in them receiving more money, but really helps when you're going to hire someone. How much is this position worth? What should we be paying to be market competitive? And you can see the midpoints for these subcategories are very different from the midpoint for the general category, allowing us to use our resources most effectively to recruit and retain employees. The final step in a job family analysis is to really look at then equity, be sure that people are being paid similar pay for similar work. So that's another future step that we would do to take this work farther.
And before we leave the presentation to discuss these issues in more depth, I'll end with just a quick mention of the remaining cost categories that we incorporate into budget planning every year. In total, in any given year, we plan for something in the $4 to $7 million range as an incremental increase for our facilities and operating items, primarily facilities and technology costs. And then the strategic choice category represents more of a discretionary but highly important set of items that we like to build into the budget each year to invest in order to maintain or gain excellence across all of our units and activities. The President generally tries to provide an investment pool, hopefully in the $10 to $20 million range if we possibly can, in order to provide additional allocations to a wide variety of goals and priorities across the institution. So with that, we are happy to move to discussion on the issues we've discussed today.
Thank you. Sure. I think before we move to discussion, we are in this segment to get a motion on the NR&R tuition. On page 29 of your docket, there is a resolution related to that. I guess maybe we should get that on the floor before we start discussing. So at this time, I would entertain a motion. Regent Swigum will move to put that on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Regent Powell will second that. It's been moved and seconded. I will now ask for discussion. Any discussion? Regent Cohen, I'm sorry.
Well, I really wanted to follow Regent Lucas because I agree with what she's going to say, but...
Do you want to yield to Regent Lucas?
Sure.
Regent Lucas, I just didn't see you at first.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just like to preface it by saying that this is a topic that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. and it's one that I hope we can get right. As you know, the Board of Regents adopted a resolution in March of 2016 that reads, "The university will attempt to raise NR&R tuition rates to the middle of the Big Ten. These increases will be incremental with an evaluation of impact on international and national students every year." I think that we all share the goal that the university continues on its path to become a nationally known public research university. Well, we've made great strides in that regard. We have some things to overcome, including demographic projections and the fact that so far 46% of our NR&R students come from a single state, Illinois. Our brand is getting better, but it has much room for improvement. I think many of us agree on another thing, and that is that the state of Minnesota needs to attract a talent to our state. We have workforce needs, and the university needs to play a big role in that. So far, we have increased NR&R tuition by 7.5% in 2016, and last year we jumped to 12.5%. With that big increase, we saw our NR&R applications go down considerably. We jumped in with more national recruiting and increased money for waivers. Thankfully, we were able to yield a good class. This year, I am told that at this point in time, in comparable NR&R applications, we're down significantly again. And that's compared to a year when we were significantly down. So it's not, that's, I think, material. I've heard that perhaps we're down as much as 50%. It is early, and things can change. So it's not time really to panic, but we have to face the fact that we're going to have to hire recruiters and increase waiver amounts if we're going to compete in that level. There are no guarantees that even those efforts will keep up enough to overcome the demographics and the sticker shock. The question is, will an aggressive 15% increase put us ahead of our skis? For those of us who ski, we know that invariably, if you get ahead of your skis, you will take a tumble. If we do not meet our goals in attracting increasing NR&R and international students, our budget will take a hit that we are not prepared for. We need to recognize what a huge role increasing NR&R tuition has played in the past 10 years, and it has increased our ability to keep documentation for in-state students. I'm going to vote against this resolution with the hope that we can come back and substitute a slower tuition increase that will be more in keeping with our 2016 resolution and will lessen the chance that we will get ahead of our skis.
Thank you, Regent Lucas. Regent Cohen.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. This morning we had an interesting discussion about our emphasis on diversity. And I think it's also very important to the university to have diversity in many different ways. And one of those ways is a geographic diversity, having both national and international students. For me, from my perspective, I really want our university to be a university of national prominence, and I think we're getting there. We're number 8 as a public research university. We can attract strong faculty, strong students, and it's good for the state of Minnesota. So I believe as a top-tier public institution, we are committed to excellence, and I believe that some of our NR&R students add to that excellence. One other point is that I don't believe that our NR&R students see a discounted price of admission and attendance until after they've applied. And it concerns me that they may not apply when they see a very high sticker price before they realize that there would be a discounted price. So for me, I would much prefer a more measured approach, perhaps a 10% over a couple years, rather than jumping to 15% for this year. So I'm also going to vote against a 15% increase and hope that perhaps, I do believe we need to increase, but perhaps it can be in a more measured way.
Thank you, Regent Cohen. Student Representative Kian.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Also, thank you, Regent Lucas and Regent Cohen, for supporting students in this initiative. I'd also like to thank the President's Office for including our student our suggestions to cap tuition at 5.5%. It is this incorporation of our suggestions that demonstrates the willingness for this board to work with students on the topic of the tuition increase. When weighing the costs and benefits of the tuition increase, we find that the tuition increase has a significantly adverse effect on students that want to enter the University of Minnesota. We are in a world today in which education is already extremely unaffordable. As students, we have so many struggles dealing with housing insecurities and food insecurities, and even if these costs could be added to our loans, it's something that would impact us immediately after graduation when we're still working to find jobs that will help support us when paying off those loans. I think that what Regent Cohen was suggesting about potentially lowering the percentage of increase to 10% would be an extremely good step for this board to consider when we're talking about jumping and increasing our tuition. Thank you.
Thank you, Student Representative Keon. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Regent Lucas for really activating this discussion and pushing staff and pushing our colleagues to think about this issue. I remember when it was in front of us a few years ago, I made the comment, and as most did, we really need to see data. We need to see the numbers, and we have seen numbers. The numbers are that even after offering more waivers and even after the increased cost of recruiters, we have yielded more money to the bottom line. That is, we've reduced money we would have otherwise had to charge to Minnesota students. So there's nothing in the data so far that indicates that we can't continue with a fairly aggressive trajectory. And I remember the comment from Mr. McMaster the first year we did this. He said, well, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'll paraphrase it, that we wouldn't have met that first year's goals without the advent of more recruiters. And in reading some of the data, some of the narrative from the packet, he's indicating we're still not at par with other schools in terms of recruiters. We talked a few hours ago the need for recruitment in our system campuses and the need for recruitment in our urban areas. So I think we need a whole new plan around recruiting, not just people who network and event place, but salespeople, because they can pay for themselves. You think of a recruiter, the cost for a recruiter can pay for themselves in 3 or 4 sales. First, getting a student who wouldn't otherwise be here will pay for themselves in a very small number. So I think a call center, doing something really bold around that, that's what those other schools, they've been way ahead of us. And so I think they're organic, it's not been organic growth, but they've been in this recruiting side. So I don't think if we don't hit it exactly, we can slow back, but let's not underestimate our ability to, with good recruiting, maybe we'll exceed our midpoint for out-of-state tuition and our that is there. So thanks again.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Next we'll hear from Regent Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, Mr. Burnett or Ms. Tonneson. If we were to scale this back and look at over a 5-year period that we wanted to get to the middle of the Big Ten in non-resident tuition, what would the annual increase have to be approximately?
Mr. Chairman, Regent Johnson, that's a tough one because we don't know what our competitors are going to do. If we assume that they're going, and most of what we've seen is 3 to 5% annual increases on their non-resident. You're probably something around 8 to 12% would be a range we'd have to think about. It really depends on who we're comparing ourselves to and what they intend to do from their revenue side and what's going on in their state government. So I could give you a range, but it's going to be built on a whole lot of assumptions about what the rest of the Big Ten would do.
Well, Mr. Chairman, been many discussions, and thanks to my colleagues for their work and discussion on this issue. Anytime you talk about a 15% increase today seems quite a bit, just in layman's terms. On the other side of the equation, we know that we're falling behind in the Big Ten, and it just seems to me, and no one's lobbied me, that somewhere less than 15. If it's a 10% increase for this particular budget cycle, then we can review it, see what the applications are, what the yield rate is, and we can go from there. I know we need the money. Regent Beeson, you make excellent point about recruiters, and maybe that needs to be revisited as well. So there's all kinds of arguments, but I think if we can find a middle ground moving forward, I think we'll move in the right direction, but not probably 15%.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. President Kaler, did you want to answer?
I'll just, thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll just insert a couple of observations here. I think we do not need to be concerned about applications. In fact, the application numbers did drop. The feeling is that those dropped because we lost people who applied simply because it was cheap to go to the University of Minnesota. We see a general increase that the quality of the institution is such now that students for whom it was a big reach simply are not applying. We're seeing very strong applications in the ACT, SAT ranges that we accept, number one. Number two, the actual applications date to date this year to last year from NRNR students are down 6.6%, so fairly modest drop. And again, timing this year is odd because we've changed our application structures, so the year-to-year comparisons are a little bit hard to make. We in general have been lagging. And again, the current NRNR rate is 13 out of 14 in the Big Ten, compared to our undergraduate resident tuition rate, where we're 7 out of 14 in the Big Ten. So we are dramatically below the cost of peer institutions. I do not believe that the value of a degree from the University of Minnesota is any less than the value of a degree from our peer institutions, for whom out-of-state NRNR students pay considerably more. Given where we are, to Regent Johnson's comments, I didn't have time to run all of the numbers, but if you assume that the midpoint of the Big Ten increases at roughly 5% a year, well, we would have to increase 5% a year to maintain exactly where we are now, 13 out of 14. So again, we're going to have to make the jump to the middle of the Big Ten. 15% increases in the next year would get us there if that midpoint doesn't move. That probably will move, so we'll have to do something again. That's really a 3-year window. If you stretch it to 5 years, I don't think you're going to dramatically drop the rate of increase that you're going to see. So I think the question here for the board is, do you want to be in the midpoint of the Big Ten? And do you believe the brand is strong enough? In fact, we did see a sag last year, and I'll finish with this. And you know what? Our recruiting people had to work harder. And when they worked harder, we filled the class. Do I think, and we did that with a 12.5% increase. Do I think we can do that again with a 15% increase? I absolutely do. And I think we can do it with targeted recruiting, and I can think we can do it in a way that maintains diversity and with waivers and scholarships, a range of access for people of all income levels. So I think it's time to pull the Band-Aid and do this. We all know the legislative perspective on this. And finally, we're talking about students, as Regent Rocha will say at some point, I suspect, who are not here yet. And we're protecting the NRNR students who are here with a 5.5% cap on what they would do with their tuition. I'll stop there, Mr. Chair, but would perhaps answer other comments or questions as the discussion proceeds.
Thank you, President Kaler. Regent Sviggum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I do not disagree with some of the points that the first 3 colleague speakers said. I think they made a couple of good points, but I strongly support the President's recommendation for the NRNR rate. First of all, I think the market demands it. Second from the bottom in the Big Ten. Second from the bottom. 13th out of 14th is the way the President phrased it. This only puts us into that mid-range, into a competitive game. The market demands it from the standpoint of the applications that have come forward. And I think most importantly, members, you got to put this perspective on it. Come May, come May, we're going to have a budget of X. I don't know if that X is 3.96 billion or 4.02 billion or whatever it is. We're going to have a market of X. And if we don't get some of that 8.8 million, I think is what you've attributed this to, out of NRNR, which is justified, absolutely justified by the market competition, we will get it from Minnesota students or from Minnesota taxpayers. One or the other. And it sure seems fitting to me to say that this puts us in a market competitiveness so that when we get to May, this X doesn't have to be so much from Minnesota students.
Thank you, Regent Sviggum. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good discussion, and I'm happy to hear that people are engaged. Sometimes feel like we're having the same discussion repeatedly, but I think we're having the right conversation. I will be. I don't know if I'm the only person, but my only reservation with this is I think we're taking too long to get there. I think that this would be the equivalent. I think about this in terms of. I don't know if anybody around the table has experience with pricing products and marketing products internationally, but if you're gonna sell toothpaste, you don't look at the price of your toothpaste and say, well, gee, we don't want to go up too much of a percent. You say, what does the market say we can sell our toothpaste for? And stemming from Regent Sviggum's comments, we are still not where the product is valued by the market right now. Regent Cohen made the comment that she would like us to be a university of national prominence. As an alumnus of the institution and having been involved with the university now for the overwhelming majority of my life, I believe we've always been, during my lifetime, a university of national and international prominence. But I would also say when you look at the marketplace and you say, well, which schools are the ones that we hold out as those of the greatest prominence, they're the ones that are, it's certainly not those of us that are looking at a Walmart pricing scheme. It's those that are demanding the price for the value of what they're providing. There are two different considerations. When we talk about students from Minnesota, and this is the sales pitch we make to the legislature, we're talking about access and keeping it affordable in the value proposition. And what we've done of late has not, I don't think, had fidelity to that obligation. And I look at this as, when we look at how we price NRNR, for one, we talk about 46%, I believe, of our non-residents are from Illinois. Well, when you tell a Minnesota student that they don't have a space here in Minnesota because an Illinois student is coming, what is that student paying even if they're able to get in at the University of Illinois? It's substantially more. And those are considerations that we have to take into account. But one is we've got our mission as the state's land-grant university, but I also think another major premise is the one that Representative Keon spoke to a minute ago, is that we also want to have we want to be respectful of the students who are already here, and that's a very important part of this for me, is that the increase for students who came in under a certain expectation don't have this kind of a change midstream for them, and I think that the President has done a nice job of protecting that with the guidance and input from our students. So with respect to that, looking at this financially, I could go on. There's many more data points here, but the data, consistent with what Regent Beeson was saying, all demonstrates that this is the right direction. I personally think the right direction is actually to just get there and then use your funds for recruiting and for targeted opportunities for reductions for students that meet certain expectations. But in the absence of being able to convince the board to move with that level of boldness, I will support this.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll be brief. I like the data, and I like looking at issues like price elasticity, which is what we're looking at here. And we don't have certainty around that. I think we have better information than we had 2 years ago, and we have indicia that we can take advantage of some significant price elasticity here. But I would do so only with doubling down on Regent Beeson's observation that we have to we have to double down on the recruiting and the investment in marketing and perhaps some philanthropy to get there, because I think that is the key. We could probably go higher than this, to Regent Roche's point. We could certainly go lower and be a little safer, but I think we can get there if we're willing as an organization to invest in those added recruiters and marketers and go after this market with some aggression. And lastly, I'd note that we do well as an organization when we set goals. And I think setting some goals around recruiting and marketing that reflect a significantly higher price point, but still not that high relative to our peers, would be a good thing. I've seen President Kaler and the administration, we think about our gold and maroon measures, do very well against those, and there's room for a measure here. So I can support 15 if we're ready to put the money and effort and resources into recruiting and marketing.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. The only point that I want to add is that there are many schools in our peer set who charge more than we do now, significantly more, but also have significantly better outcomes in terms of the percent of non-resident students attending. So in the case of the University of Wisconsin, which charge well more than we do, a third of their students. So they're really performing well. University of Iowa, even more than that. University of Illinois sit about where we would. They're over 25%. So I think the data would suggest that the point that's already been made several times, we can get more here. We can continue to attract students if we supplement that with a significant increase in recruiting. So I'm supportive of the President's proposal.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I too am in support. I do want to note that in 2 years, I believe, using the numbers that are in the presentation, we're going to get to $33,000, which would put us in 8th place for this year. So it would take us, I think, 3 years to actually get to the midpoint of the Big Ten at 15% per year. So 15% really doesn't even get us that far, which, which is, I think, on the low side of what I would really want. But I think 15% is adequate for what we're doing if we can commit to 2 years. I think there are a lot of ways to think about this, and as someone who came here from out of state in 1983, the Regents that year, I think you guys have heard me tell this story, the Regents that year raised tuition 25% between the time that I accepted admission and then showed up for orientation or enrollment, actually registering for classes. So I understand, everybody looks at these numbers and they're just so huge. And I want to point out that Wisconsin, their in-state students only pay $10,000. So I think the part of this conversation that I'm uncomfortable with is the fact that, we're having a one-sided discussion. We're only talking about the NR&R. We haven't even had a chance to talk about the residents. And I would love to be able to freeze the resident tuition in the spring when we get to it. But without having that part of the discussion available to us today, I think the 15% is adequate. But I do want to just warn people that if after 2 years of that, we're only going to get to about 8th place today. So we're going to likely be in the 10th or 11th position in 2 years at 2 increases of 15% per year. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. Ms. Can, Student Representative Can, you wanted to speak again?
Yes, thank you. There are several other ways in which we can define the value of our institution and the degree that we receive from the University of Minnesota. All of these conversations that you guys have had about the additional recruitment that we could do to bring up the numbers of our students that we incorporate into our school do nothing to talk about how we can alleviate the stress and financial burdens that we'll put on students that are accepted after that additional recruitment. I think that if you guys are going to have this conversation about increasing tuition, there should also be a conversation about how we can support those students so they're not going to be suffering under the financial burden. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Student Representative. Regent Lucas.
Thank you. I just want a point of clarification. Is the motion for a 115% increase? We're not committing to 2 years, is that right?
It's on page 29, I believe. Just this fiscal year. Just this fiscal year, one fiscal year, yes, ma'am. Yes, Regent Lucas. Okay, so I don't see no more hands up, but I'm going to ask Senior Vice President Burnett. We had a question about recruiting. Can you explain if there's money in the budget for that or where we are on that?
Regent McMillan and Regent Powell, we are planning to make those investments, and Regent Beeson as well, in recruiters. And part of asking you to make this decision now is we aren't going to wait to hire those recruiters. Those recruiters are going to get added to our cadre here shortly, because to make sure we bring that class in, we can't sit still. And so our planning around this was not just to raise this to bring in a revenue piece, but was also to add revenues to the admissions office, additional revenue in the budget for scholarships and for recruiters. So it's all together, even though we haven't put the final budget together for FY19. It is our plan to move forward quickly on that if this was a decision of the board. I just wanted to assure you we are making those investments in recruiting.
Okay. I guess one of the prerogatives of the board chair is you get to say something before we vote, and I'll just tell you this is why being on this board sometimes can be hard. I think it's interesting. I'll just tell you my perspective. On our last board meeting, we talked about NR. It was a Friday. I stayed overnight because there was a football game. It happened to be Parents' Weekend. I went to a couple Parents' Weekends events. I didn't tell anybody that I was on the board of Regents, but I asked people what they thought about the University of Minnesota, and I met so many people who said, we're from Pennsylvania, we're from Illinois, we're from Missouri. We love it here. And our kids love being here, and thanks for keeping your tuition low so we can afford it. That's one perspective, and I see that. And it's hard to make the vote. I also understand that 15%, and I very much agree with Regent Hsu that we can do this 2 or 3 years and we're still going to be 11th, 12th, or 13th in the Big Ten. It's just where we are. I agree with Regent Rocha. It's the price the marketplace can get, and I think we have to do that. But I also think we should do it with care. I'm okay with 15%. It's taken me a long, long time to get there. I would be okay with 10% too. The biggest point I have with this is we're going to go on to the other budget variables, and even with 15%, we're going to ask to raise tuition on Minnesota students 2%. That's probably my biggest fear. Another thing that has happened on many of our colleagues who have a wide spread between non-resident and resident tuition is it seems that many of them use non-resident tuition to raise income, and the number of students from their own states goes down. Michigan 51-49, Iowa's even 50-49. Wisconsin, where it's really inexpensive, is 57-33. So, but we kind of would like to have 67 to 70% Minnesota kids. So we do have to raise some tuition to get them in. So anyway, that's my speech. Unless anybody else wants a minute to talk, we are going to vote on the resolution, which is for a 15% rate. It is on the table. At this time, I will just ask those all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, duly noted. Motion passes. So now we're going to go on to I left Vice President Tonneson, or Senior Vice President Burnett. I left you about 15 minutes for other budget variables that we're going to talk about today but not make decisions, correct?
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we can certainly talk about it. We can back up in the slides to show you what variables we're looking at for input. If the board wants to provide that input today, obviously we'll be putting this together between now and bringing it back in February for another iteration. But the idea today was to just educate the board about, one, the framework, two, the more development of it. The decision today helps us hone in on what the budget would look like more in February, assuming it's approved by the full board tomorrow, the decision that was just made. So each of these iterations get us closer to putting together what a framework would look like for next year. But we're happy to answer any questions. And if there's none, we can certainly pick it up at the next.
Okay. There's no slides or anything on the.
No.
Okay. So it's just any questions on, you know, what they're thinking. I guess any questions. President Kaler, you would like to say something?
Chair Anderson, in recognition of that, we do have a little bit of time, and I hate just to do this, but several members have asked me and Senior Vice President Burnett about job families and about benchmarking and about how we set salaries. And you have that data in front of you, and Vice President Brown talked about it relatively quickly. So if you would go back to slide number 10, I think it is, in the deck. Again, this is how we. This is the answer to the question that some of the members have asked. We've done a very detailed analysis of the job families, what people do, classified them across the institution into areas in which they do like work. The next slide shows granularity around that in terms of, where is it, that slide after, I'm sorry, the slide, where's the?
It's 13, I believe.
13, slide 14, please. Sorry, granularity around this, and these are the midpoints of the classifications, and these are market-based. These are what people get paid to do this work in the United States, in the state of Minnesota, or in the Twin Cities. So perhaps Vice President Brown might take a little bit of time to talk about how these salaries are set, and a little bit of perspective for the board around what the external variables are that influence those salary levels. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I think you can do this.
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, whenever we look at job market, we look at where do we hire those individuals from. So for example, when we're thinking about our labor represented individuals, most of those people are hired from the Twin Cities metro area. So we would look at that Twin Cities market to determine what would be a market comparison for that group of employees. When we look at P&A and civil service salaries, some of those groups are hired from the metro area, and that would be where we would look. Many are hired from a regional area. Many are hired from a national higher education market. So we are looking at the market that is applicable for the particular job type, and the easiest way to think about it is, where do you hire those people from? And then that's the way you think about your market. We work with the Office of Institutional Research to determine what are comparable institutions of higher education for comparisons for each of our campuses. That's not set time to time by the Office of Human Resources, but we have set comparables that we look at for Morris, that we look at for Crookston, that we look at for the Twin Cities, Rochester, Duluth, etc. So when we look at the markets, then we are defining what is the range, and when we post this, this is looking at a midpoint. And it's not saying that every employee would come in and be employed at the midpoint. That's not our goal. Because if someone were an entry-level employee with no experience, they would probably come in at an entry level in the market, at the low end of that market range. If we hire someone that is at a substantial number of years of experience with very unique skill sets and particular to the job that we're looking for, of course that may drive their salary higher, and they may be even at the higher than midpoint range in the market. But as we think of it overall, we're trying to look at a midpoint of the range as a marker, if you will, a way to center your thinking. So is this an employee that we think is about in the middle? Is it a new employee? Is it someone that has been here for a while and we're looking at their performance and they've had meritorious performance and we want to reward them? We know that they maybe even are having other employers seek them, and so we want to try to keep them, so we may move them up a little bit in the market range. So that's essentially how we do it.
Thank you. Regents Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. If I could follow up on what you were saying. First of all, we have these 21 job families. Within that, about 670 job classes. Is that correct?
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, yes, I believe it is about that number.
670 job classes for approximately 9,000 persons. So
about 40% of our workforce.
About 9,000, I think. There's probably about 13 persons per job class. I mean, we've divided this so much that a job responsibility right now, you can't even find anybody else to put into your class. I mean, 670 classes is a little bit of a large grouping. As we look at the market competitiveness, and I understand to hire a CEO, Mr. Burnett, it's a nationwide search. It's a nationwide competitive market. There's many of the other classes, for instance, in HR or in IT, or maybe in communications, our job market might be, the city of Minneapolis or the state of Minnesota, comparable. And again, in the minimal research that I've done, how did we do the original range in those job classes or job codes? Because in the minimal research I've done, the salaries paid here are significantly greater than maybe the state of Minnesota pays in IT or in communications or in your department HR, or the Dakota County pays in those same job classes, job families. Am I making myself clear how they originally determined? Because it seems to me they're inflated quite a bit over the...
Vice President Brown, an answer?
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, Regent Swigum, there's a couple things that worked in this process. One, when we started this process, we used an outside consultant, and they helped us look at market ranges that would be appropriate for the type of work. And again, we looked to markets in which we were competing for the jobs. Typically, we do not compete with the state of Minnesota for workers. We don't go back and we don't have employees that go back and forth a lot in that sector. So oftentimes we are competing against private sector in the area. For example, if you want to take finance, the talent that we recruit is often in the private sector and comes to the university. In my own office just recently, just as an illustration, we recruited somebody in a business analyst position from Target. When they had a layoff, we actually recruited them in at a lesser salary than they had been paid at Target. So, but when we're looking at originally we're looking at the markets, all of those factors were considered. The second thing we considered is what we were paying. And when we went for a number of years without any market ranges to determine, they say, gosh, we want to hire Kathy Brown, and she's been working someplace in the private sector in the community, and here's what she was making. And Kathy comes in and says, gosh, I'd like to make what I had been making. And we historically didn't have job families, didn't have these ranges that were helping people determine what was an appropriate thing. So some of our ranges ended up being very broad, much broader than they would be if we had just done it from scratch without considering the salaries of our current employees. So what we're doing now at round 2 is actually refining those market ranges. They probably will become a little bit more narrow based on the work being done. It has not been my experience that our pay is in excess of others in our community in the public sector. That is generally competitive. I think that if you look at the state of Minnesota alone, you might have a different point of view. But when you look more broadly, we have not found that to be the case, and we also find that many of the people that we are hiring at the university are coming from the private sector, where we are not as high as the private sector in many areas.
Thank you. Got a quick follow-up? we're off the agenda.
Give me time or not?
Give you time.
I understand what you're saying. And we are in a second round, you said, right now, of comparison or studies?
Yes.
We're in the second round that will last how long?
Well, we have, approximately 20 families to go through, and we will pace it out over a couple, 3 years probably.
3 years. 20 families and 670 job codes.
Yeah.
Let me just humbly suggest that our competition, our market competition, is Dakota County, is state of Minnesota, is Hennepin County. And what I've found to be true, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but in people I've talked to, when we recruit from the private sector, those folks come from the private sector are looking at two different things. One is the salary, but the other is the benefits, the pension, the other benefits that are obtained by working here at the public sector that we're not in the private sector. And my sense is that the benefits are rather significant compared to the private sector, where the salary is probably competitive, at least, if not a little more than competitive. I get always whipsawed when I talk to different people. One talks about the benefits and the other talks about the salary. And I think it's unfair to say it's just competition is the private sector, because many of those folks, not all, and I'm generically saying come from the private sector, probably don't have the benefit structure that we do in the public sector, myself.
We can let her take a swing, but then I want to wrap it up.
Thank you. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I just wanted to ask a clarification question. So the numbers that we're looking at here, I don't know if they're real numbers or not, but let's just say you just took this page and took off the names and put in some titles. This is just the salary portion of the total compensation. Is that correct?
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, that is correct.
And then we generally add on, what is it, a third on top of this, or is it more than that? I can't remember.
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, we do have a fringe rate, which I would say would add about a third in terms of cost, and that would be an average. That's not precise, but it would be reasonable to think of.
Okay, so follow-up.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So then when we do an analysis, do we do it on the total comp, or do we do it on just the salary? Because there is a big difference. You'll get different answers if you don't use the total comp when you compare.
Vice President Brown.
Yes, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. So as I discussed, this is focusing on base pay, and if we look at that employee value proposition, there are other things that are part of the employee value proposition, which is benefits, leave, and so forth. So there are other factors. For market evaluation for salaries, we will only look at base pay. If you're looking at a total compensation analysis, that's a different kind of analysis and one that we don't have here today. But we do an analysis of our benefits. We have benefits comparisons. We provided those to the board on an annual basis. Usually in the spring we talk about our health benefits and so forth. We also have a valuation comparison that we use of our retirement programs to determine how they compare against other retirement programs from other employers. So we do consider all of those factors in determining whether, as a whole package, our pay is competitive in the marketplace and allows us to recruit and retain employees.
Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Regents Figum had talked, I remember we've had a conversation about where the big discrepancies are between the state and the university. I know he's mentioned at the leadership level, commissioners are paid quite a bit less than our managers, and I think, those are temporary jobs. They're sometimes political. They're not career jobs. But there is a big difference, and Regents Swigum has made that point. But then as you go down the line, I'd be interested in some macro information about what percentage of employees we get from the private sector. I like hiring for the private sector. I think they bring a lot to the table. What percentage we get from the state or other cities, and is that a 2/3, 1/3 mix? It would just be interesting to know what that looks like.
Thank you. I think I'll let Senior Vice President Burnett wrap this up and answer some questions, and then the agenda has us for a 10-minute break. So,
one final comment, just to echo and add on to what Vice President Brown has said, Regent Swigum and Regent Hsu. I think it's not just where we attract talent from, it's where do we lose talent to. So I would submit to you, we don't lose IT professionals to the state of Minnesota. I've talked to Vice President Golichek. We lose them to 3M. We lose them to Target. We lose them to Medtronic. So, and when we lose senior executives like Danita Brown to the University of Illinois, Brooks Jackson to the University of Iowa, to Catrice Albert to the NCAA, we don't lose them to the state of Minnesota. We lose them to their market comparator. So I think that, to Regent Beeson's point, I think we need to bring back not just where did we hire people from, but where did we lose them to, because that, to me, is there are different markets within this $3.8 billion complex organization. To Vice President Brown's point, there's a market for the trades that's very different than the market for senior executives of universities and colleges and everything in between. So I think that's what we're trying to parse out, is how do we get to the right compensation package for those. And I think more data, just like we brought to you in the earlier discussion on R&R, would help bring some clarity for you. So I hope that that's helpful to you.
Thank you, Vice President Burnett. Vice President Brown, Vice President Tonneson, thanks for your time. Thanks for your presentation. We're going to take a break, and we're going to reconvene at 3:15. Where is it? 13-minute break. Where is it? So the other thing you didn't see a break on here?
We don't even
Accepted the report.
you guys obey pretty good. Just hit the gavel and it gets quiet. Okay, we are ready to resume. I'm looking on my agenda here. We are going to have a presentation on student housing across the system. Senior Vice President Burnett, I will let you introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today we're going to take, at the board's request and in our work plan, kind of a view of student housing across the system campuses. At the October meeting, we gave you detail on housing on the Twin Cities campus. So today we're going to start up in the northwest corner of the state with Lisa Samuelson, the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor for Crookston. And then we're just going to go in alphabetical order among the campuses to Duluth, Morris, and then Rochester to give the board a glimpse of what's new or interesting or challenging on our 4 system campuses with respect to student housing. So with that, Ms. Samuelson, you want to begin?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Crookston Res Life has undergone tremendous growth and revitalization in the last 12 years. We've been constructing new facilities while removing outdated ones, and we have well suited ourselves to move into the upcoming decades. Our current occupancy as of 2 weeks ago was 489 students, and that does not include our 13 community advisors. Of that 489, that actually is 42% of the students that live on or that are taking on-campus classes, because we also have online. So Crookston is experiencing decreased enrollment. So the 489 students is down from our high point in 2012 when we had 632 students living on campus. That leaves our current occupancy within the residential facilities at 73% of our maximum capacity of 672. A silver lining within that is that we have been able to accommodate the increased request for demand of single rooms on campus, which has been nice because the increased number of students want to have single rooms as a possibility, and that also then has helped us to, it helps offset some of the loss of the capacity as well. We also have maintained a steady number of our first-year students who have decided to live on campus, as this year we have 92% of our first-year students who are electing to live on campus, so that is a stable number. So where are these students living? We have 5 on-campus residence halls, 2 traditional, 2 apartment style, and our most recent building, Heritage, was built in 2012, and that is suite style and accommodates predominantly first-year students. Slide, please. So at Crookston, we pride ourselves in the high-quality facilities and services that we offer, led by our fantastic staff up on campus. And although we have always bragged about how wonderful and beautiful our residence halls are, we're starting to get some outside recognition of that as well. Niche, which is a online educational resource that rates pretty much all sorts of things in education, but also beyond that, has ranked UMC Residential Life with an A rating for its safe, clean, and modern amenities. We are ranked number 4 in the category of best college dorms in Minnesota, even though we don't use the word dorm very often. And we are ranked number 1 in the category of safety on campus. We also were the first in Minnesota in Residence Life to offer a LEED certified building through environmental efficiency. Slide, please. So obviously more important to us than awards and recognition is the area of academic success for our students on campus. In Residential Life, we pride ourselves at creating sound educational environments for our students. Whether it's building or re-examining our current structures and making sure we're creating ample study space, to making sure that our policies are in place to allow for 24-hour respect hours, sleep study hours, and creating programs to recognize the outstanding contributions of our students, we make every effort at making sure that the academic success is number 1 for our students who live on campus. This past spring, 38% of our Residential Life students received a 3.5 GPA or better. And very consistent with the national trends, our students who live on campus fare slightly better than our students who live off campus in regards to their academic success. Our on-campus students received last spring a GPA of 3.1, whereas the students off campus were at a 2.87. Similarly, our 4-year graduation rate for our 2012 cohort was 44.9% compared to 41.7% for the 4-year graduation rate. Slide, please. So where do we go from here? What are our future plans? Well, Crookston Princeton's top priority, both in residential life as well as campus overall, is to increase our on-campus enrollment. If we increase on-campus enrollment, then our occupancy rates within our residential life facilities will also increase. So we are working very closely with all the campus entities to make sure that our on-campus enrollment is our #1 priority. We are working specifically with admissions. We have, currently we're examining our communication flow with our prospective students. We are also rolling out a new initiative where prospective students who are visiting campus can stay in our Heritage Residence Hall free of charge and to have a true student experience while being recruited. We're also working across campus in increasing the utilization of our facilities over the summer through introductions of more camps and conferences so that the pipeline can be filled a little earlier with awareness of the Crookston campus. We also are trying to maintain our costs, making sure that our facilities are of course still beautiful, but making sure that our costs through services and maintenance are being moderated. We're also closely working with our dining partner Sodexo, making sure that the overall affordability is sound for our campuses living on campus. And lastly, our priority is to maintain our overall high quality in our facilities and services. So although repair and maintenance is something that must be done every year, our buildings are in very good shape. Our one project that we'll have coming up in the next couple of years, Skyberg, built in 1970, has its original roof. So that is probably our biggest improvement that we'll be needing to make in the next few years at a general cost of approximately $650,000. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chancellor Irwin.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Irwin.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Greetings, members. Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about the Duluth housing story. So we're going to start with an overview. So on the left side of the screen, you can see that we house about 1/3 of undergraduate students at UMD. Our facilities shake out roughly 2/3 in residence halls and another 1/3 in apartments. We have a lot of real estate at UMD, 725,000 square feet, and our buildings range in age from a very newborn at 6, or a toddler at 6, to some older facilities at 61, which I'll address later in the presentation. The real pride in UMD housing and residence life is on the right side, and that is our programming. We're really hitting our stride in terms of our 4 areas of focus that are designed directly to support academic success and student success, because we know student success is directly related to persistence and retention, and eventually to graduation. So we're proud of our collaborations with our academic units in terms of our living learning communities and the overall support that we provide our students in terms of relationship building, but also in terms of the resources that we connect them with. Next slide, please. The chart on student profile gives you a sense of who lives with us, and I think the most important statistic is, much like Crookston, 92% of our freshman class live on campus. Again, the first year is really critical. The student success for our freshmen is really important, so we're really glad to house that large of percentage of our freshman class. I think the most compelling part of this presentation for me is the student demand on the right side. We opened at full capacity this fall. And you can see in the numbers that our requests for residence halls were larger than the number of beds we had available, to the tune of almost 250. In contrast, our apartments had less requests than we had beds. So what winds up happening in Duluth is freshmen live in the apartments. And that's not a great scenario for us. It's not the same kind of experience, doesn't provide the same quality of connections and resources and support. So our future efforts are going to center around creating more residence hall beds. And finally, the first 2 bullets allude to our desire to expand our living learning communities. Our current ones are with the Leibovitz School of Business and Economics. We have the Biz Dogs. Great community that's off to a great start. We have a longer standing honors college community that's doing really well. We are steadily maintaining and upgrading our facilities in terms of roofs, windows, fire alarm systems, network. Our students are very interested in wireless, and also in terms of our building security. Our plans for the future include a study to figure out our next directions, and our hope is to complete a study that will give us a plan for the next 10 years. We hope to emerge with a pre-design for a 250-bed residence hall. And then we want to look at following phases that can flex with our enrollment changes at UMD and our enrollment goals. Two of our older halls are Vermilion and Burnside. They're the 61-year-old halls. We know they need decommissioned. And we are excited to think about what the future may hold in terms of a mixed-use facility that might have some academic components and might have some residence hall components. It's great real estate. It's right across from the Kirby Student Center, so it provides us a really exciting opportunity. UMD has enrollment strategies that would include 1% growth over the next several years, so we know we'll need additional beds for that. We're working very closely with Vice President Burnett and Vice President Bertelsen on our planning process, including our finance and operations folks on the Duluth campus. So the future is really bright and very exciting for Duluth. There are a couple other pressures that I wanted to mention. The Duluth community, as Regent McMillan can testify, has an affordable housing issue. So when we're not able to house our students and meet our demand, the Duluth community has issues in terms of meeting that need. So it's important for us to continue to expand our facilities in a thoughtful way so that we can meet the student needs and help our Duluth community. The other exciting pressure that we feel is in our internationalization efforts. We have a fairly new English as a second language program, not always able to house all of those students. We have programs that are short-term in length, so if we add 250 residence hall beds, we'll create capacity on the apartment side to be able to house our graduate students, house our international students in some of these short-term programs. So the future's bright. We're hitting our stride with our programming, and we're looking forward to an exciting planning process. And now I'll hand it over to Vice Chancellor Olson-Loy.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Ron. Thank you, Regent Anderson and members of the board. We're really happy to have a chance to talk with you about Morris Housing this afternoon. As you know and likely can see from our materials, the residential life experience at Morris is a core part of our student experience and really foundational to our mission as the University of Minnesota's residential public liberal arts campus. As you can see on the slides, we have about 847 students living on campus this fall. This includes just over 50% of our student body, and for us about 95% of our first-year students typically live on campus, and that is true this year as well. Our students who don't live on campus live largely in apartments and houses in the town of Morris, and about 90 to 95% of our students each year live within a mile of the campus. So this highly residential community really supports students' transitions to college, their engagement, deep engagement in campus life, and their academic success. And it's a hallmark of an undergraduate liberal arts campus. It also, for us, supports the vitality of our rural community, and the Morris student population comprises a third of the town of Morris's population of 5,000 and about 20% of Stevens County's population of 10,000 residents. On campus, about 2/3 of our campus housing is in traditional residence hall spaces, and the remaining 1/3 includes our new suite-style Green Prairie community, which opened in 2013 and was our first new construction in about 40 years on the campus for residential life, and our apartments which were built in the 70s. Overall, our capacity or occupancy is at 95% of our recommended capacity, and that's up from 742 students a decade ago. Next slide. Our aggregated data shows that living on campus has a really positive impact on student success. So this shows for students who lived on campus their first year at Morris, they earned higher GPAs than students who lived off campus in their first year, and they were more likely to persist to their second year and to graduate within 4 years. Our residential life program, much like all of our campuses, prioritizes building students' connections and sense of belonging on campus, student learning and success, and the provision of quality facilities and services. We do benchmark our students' residential life experience each year with an annual benchmarking survey that's provided through the National Association for College Housing Officers. And Morris students, as we note here, rank our sense of safety and security on campus unusually high, and it places us in the top 5% of universities nationally that participate in that study. They also give us especially high ratings now for our facilities, and also that they identify that they have a greater capacity to impact their actions to live a sustainable life in the future more than their peers at other institutions. Overall, our students rate our housing experience as good, and they say that their likelihood of recommending Morris to future first-year students for living on campus is excellent. Core to this work, and we want to note, are our student peer leaders who play major roles on our campus and really bring our positive Morris residential life student experience to life. Next slide. Our 2007, soon-to-be updated Morris strategic plan called for us to create contemporary student life facilities to support student recruitment and retention. And aligned with that plan, and also recognizing that prospective students historically rated our competitors' campus housing above ours, we completed a series of investments that you see detailed on this slide to improve our students' living environments. I'm happy to report that Morris students have valued the $2.25 million reinvestment from our student housing dollars directly into their living environments. And as you can see from the chart, their student ratings of our facilities have increased to excellent in our benchmarking report over that time period. Our capital priorities now move to those slightly less glamorous infrastructure maintenance, such as window replacement in our 2 traditional residence halls, which were constructed in 1965 and 1970. Other Res Life priorities for us include a focus on student retention, including addressing students' interest in single rooms and embedding evidence-based mental health and well-being initiatives throughout all of campus life, and especially for first-year students in our residence halls. We'll continue to monitor the housing demand that we have on campus for new and continuing students, and also stay abreast of possibilities for a public-private partnership related to some near-campus housing development that's underway in Morris. And finally, I want to just highlight a little bit about a collaborative effort that was also initiated and highlighted in our last strategic plan. In 2008, our Residential Life program began collaborating with the new Conferences and Events office on our campus to look at how we could increase summer use on campus to grow what we're calling the 3 R's. So we want to enhance student recruitment, our campus reputation, and revenues. And each of the programs that we're doing don't have to fit all 3 of those areas, but they should touch on at least one, and the more they can touch on all 3, the better. So you see from a baseline of really not utilizing our facilities in the summer in 2007, where we had 370 summer residents and guests in our residence halls and only $22,000 in revenue. We've now grown to over almost 1,200 summer residents and guests and over $100,000 in revenue this past summer. We know that we are much more likely to enroll prospective students when they've visited the campus and have had a chance to see our beautiful and peaceful campus, and also meet our faculty, staff, and our students in our community. So events like those that are highlighted, our own Cougar Volleyball High Performance Camp for high school students, our partnership with the University of Minnesota Extension and their 3-day 4-H camp for statewide youth, and also working with groups like the Irondale Marching Band for their summer band camp, which is one of Minnesota's premier high school bands connected to the Mounds View Public Schools, now bring hundreds of the state's future college students to our campus each summer. Also, we highlight on this slide our Rural Arts and Culture Summit, and programs like it have brought 350 artists, arts organizations, rural-centric organizations, community and economic development leaders from across the state and really across the country to raise our campus profile. And it's also helped inform people of the understanding of the community beauty, big skies, and opportunities to be found in Minnesota's rural places. Coordinated with our Center for Small Towns and Springboard for the Arts, the Minnesota State Arts Board, the McKnight and Bush Foundations, and a number of university partners, we're really proud to have hosted this transformative campus event 3 different years in the last 6. So this Morris Summer Initiative's incremental and sustained growth, we think, is showing promising possibilities for us and positive impacts already in terms of our recruitment, our growth in revenues, and increasing our reputation and people's connection with the campus. We often ask people if they visited campus before when they come to these programs, and there are large numbers of people at each of these events that raise their hand that it's the first time that they've had a chance to be on our campus. So we feel it's really significant. We also think it holds great promise for greater system-wide partnerships as we elevate our thinking about how to use the unique assets and resources of each of our campuses going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Suter.
Chair Anderson and members of the committee, I want to give you and start out with a short history of UMR housing, but that's because UMR has currently a short history. So not quite the length, not quite the same information to provide to you, but we rolled our first class in fall 2009, and all of those students lived in various downtown locations, apartments, and some in close proximity to the downtown core. So UMR was acutely aware that in recruiting first-year students, we needed to provide for them an on-campus housing experience, and certainly parents, as they toured our campus, were asking for that. But Shortly after our first class enrolled, it was fortuitous that a private developer approached us about building student housing for UMR students. However, in 2009, the developer found that the financing for the project was difficult to obtain. So the City of Rochester agreed to allocate to the university $5.8 million of city sales tax for the housing and mixed-use project in downtown Rochester. So the university negotiated and signed a 10-year master lease for the following. Within that building, we had 3 floors of classrooms, science labs, res life office space, staff office, faculty space, student life space, and collaborative space. And then floors 3 through 8 of this 9-story building was student housing with a max capacity at that time of 237 students. So 318 Commons opened then in fall of 2011 with students living throughout the 3rd and 8th floors, but of course we were not fully occupied at that time. So 318 Commons management leased those apartments at market rate, and the revenue was shared with the university because we were paying the lease on those rooms, so we received the revenue from the market rate. And they housed then like Mayo medical residents, Mayo Clinic medical students, and other professionals that wanted to live in the downtown area. The 9th floor at that time was not leased by UMR and was dedicated entirely to market rate occupants. So over the life of the 10-year lease, then the $5.8 million is being returned to the University of Minnesota Rochester for other uses. And in the past now, that has included supporting housing operations during the early years, completing additional space in the building that wasn't built out in the beginning, and also developing new space for UMR in downtown Rochester. And you can see from the slide that you can see it's been truly a public-private partnership in this lease for housing for the University of Minnesota Rochester. So our housing status today, actually we've grown in our need for occupancy in the building, and so we occupy fully all of the apartments on the 3rd to 8th floors and 6 of the 14 apartments on the 9th floor. Among the student residents, there are 4 living learning communities, currently totaling 71 students. Those are currently in Healthy Living, Global Connections, Recovering on Campus, and Health Core, which is the community of respect and empowerment. So it's really underrepresented students that are low socioeconomic status, students of color, and or first-generation college students. In fall 2018, given the increase that we are predicting for our first-year student enrollment, UMR is going to add the remaining 8 apartments on the 9th floor so that we will fully occupy all of the apartments in that building and have a capacity of 277 beds. It is our goal to house as many of the first-year students that want to have a student residential life housing experience be housed in 318 Commons. And so we are anticipating the need of some additional housing for second-year students that want to stay in a res life opportunity. So we're currently exploring additional leased space in a new apartment building in downtown Rochester. The developer has expressed an interest in a master lease relationship, and so we are exploring that, and the building would be ready for fall of 2018 occupancy. And then finally, the future of housing at UMR. So as this photo shows, the City of Rochester is currently growing and building. Now, none of that building is from UMR. This is just to show you what downtown Rochester currently looks like, and you'll see some of that when you come visit us in March. But as UMR's enrollment continues to grow, we anticipate the need for additional housing in also the years 2019 and 2022. So there are some local developers that might possibly compete for the opportunity to provide housing for the majority of our first and second year students, and we want that to be available to them to support our goals like the other campuses have mentioned for retention and success of our students. And so we're looking forward to some additional partnerships where we might be leasing additional space in the future. And thank you, that's my report from Rochester.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All of you for giving us those reports. It was interesting to hear them. We've got about 5 minutes for questions, 5-10 minutes. Does anybody here on the board have questions? Ms. Student Representative Kian.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I would like to pass on the concerns of my peers from the system campuses with 2 questions. So the first one is, why has the board extended the first-year housing guarantee to first-year students across the system campuses? This is something that exists exclusively on the Twin Cities campus, although I do believe that a few of the system campuses have the infrastructure to support all first-year students, just haven't made that guarantee down on paper. But I believe Rochester and potentially it was Morris, one of them, also doesn't have the full capacity to meet all first years that want to have housing.
No, we
Just
actually house
Rochester.
all first year students.
Okay. But
we currently are housing all of the first-year students that want to live in housing. We do have some students that are coming from the Rochester community or very closely surrounding that and are choosing to live at home for financial reasons.
Student Representative Count, is the question, just so the board maybe can hear again, is the question, do they all provide a guarantee of first-year housing or a guarantee of second-year housing?
So specifically for first year, but wanting to know if that would be something that could be put down on paper. That's something that the students from the campuses have said that they were concerned about.
So the question is, some of your fellow students are concerned about that there is not a guarantee of housing?
Yes.
Okay, and I think the panel may address that possibly in just saying what you have for capacity and things like that. Do any of you have a second-year guarantee of housing? No. First, Morris?
Regent Anderson, if I could add, for Morris, we guarantee housing for any student that applies by July 1st. And so we do provide housing for all first-year students. I don't know that it is as explicit as it probably could be on our website, so I appreciate
And I would ask, Crookston, I saw has I've been to Crookston several times. I got to be careful what I say here, but you do have really, really nice housing. You got some colleagues with you there, so I don't want to say anymore. But you've got 73% occupancy because of the lower enrollment, so I would assume that virtually anybody that wants housing at Crookston gets it without a guarantee.
Yep, that's correct.
Does that answer your question, Student Representative? Student Representative Chen.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you for the presentation. I have also questions from my fellow student representatives from Duluth campus and also Rochester campus. So for Duluth campus, I think you've mentioned that there's a limited space for the residential house. And then I think the specific question is that there are dorm rooms that are converted from study rooms. I think this is somewhat a pressing issue. If you care to comment on that. For this specific question. And then for Rochester campus, as we know, the housing market is very competitive in Rochester, and many students leave off campus. I think for those who leave off campus, it's really critical for them to have legal services. I know we have legal services located in the Twin City campuses, but I don't know if everyone in Rochester knows that they have access to the student legal services. And I heard that some students reach out, but they did not get the help they need. And actually the fees from the Rochester campus pay into the student legal services located here. So I just want to make sure that the students leave off campus, they know and have access to the legal services if they need in their off-campus housing. That's my two questions. Thank you.
Panelists?
Oh, I would thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. I worked with that student that you're talking about that had some concern about using legal services on the Twin Cities campus, and unfortunately it is not true that there are fees paid by the Rochester students to the Twin Cities campus for legal services, so they cannot take advantage of the legal services, and that student was turned away for that reason. So, certainly we're going to try and see if we can help that student in the Rochester area somehow, but not through the legal services for students on the Twin Cities campus.
Thank you. That's good for us to know. It's just good for us to know. And was there a second part to that question, or is that answered, Student Representative Chen?
Yeah, I think just one more, the dorms from
Duluth. I heard a question about Duluth, and so, okay.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Representative Chen, at the beginning of the semester, we did have 30 students in study spaces. Those students have all moved now into rooms. So that's part of the reason we're wanting to do a 250-bed residence hall. That's one of the pressures that we want to alleviate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Lucas.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if married student housing is any kind of an issue on any of your campuses? I know on this campus we have some, I'd love to someday get an update on the married student housing on this campus, because I think it's kind of something we don't know too much about, and it's a little bit.
Do any of you want to tackle that? Duluth, go ahead.
Chair Anderson, Regent Lucas, thank you for the question. That is one of the capacities that we think we can meet if we're able to build a 250-bed residence hall. We will have apartment space, and we know there could be demand from married students. We'd love to create a program for graduate students and married students.
Okay.
Vice Chancellor Loy.
Regent Anderson and Member Lucas and the committee, we at Morris have primarily a traditional age 18 to 22-year-old population, so we don't have as much demand for married student housing, but we do have some, and also for some family housing that if we had a bit more capacity, we've talked about would be something that we'd like to try to address as well.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor.
Chair Anderson, members of the board, Crookston does not currently offer any married student housing, even though we do have capacity to accommodate. Due to overall cost of renting out an entire apartment, we have not been able to logistically figure out how to make it financially marketable for our married students.
Thank you. Regent Hsu had a question.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Just a general question about whether or not we have any housing projects on the 6-year plan for Duluth at this time.
Senior Vice President Burnett, do you have that knowledge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regent Hsu, no projects at present. We begin the planning process, and I was on the Duluth campus a few weeks ago talking about what that would look like. So we are at the formative stages of how we would add capacity to Duluth. And so that's in the capital planning process, and we'll be bringing that forward. But they've got to look through the financials and that type of thing, and I'm sure Vice Chancellor Irwin can brief you on where they're at on that.
Vice Chancellor Irwin, briefly.
Chair Anderson, I would like to add too that dining is part of that conversation for us in Duluth. We're also at capacity in our dining facilities, so we're going to have a comprehensive conversation, and we've already put in a request through University Services to begin that process, or that it's very close to going to.
Okay, thank you. Chair, Regent Beeson.
I'll pass.
You'll pass.
Please follow up.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So if we built a new dormitory on the Twin Cities campus, that would be debt that would be charged to the auxiliary locally here, the housing auxiliary.
Residential life hall, nice.
Yes, sir.
So is that how it would work in Duluth also, or do they have a different?
Senior Vice President Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it would be done very similarly on the Duluth campus, and we try and run all of our auxiliaries so that they can, including residential life, so that they're self-supporting and not taking funds from the academic mission. That's the goal.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So a number of you commented on the difference in academic performance between students who, freshmen, I think first-year students, it was primarily who live on campus in campus housing, and those who live live out in the market in presumably homes and apartment buildings. And I'm wondering, I think I can maybe guess for why those reasons exist, but I'm wondering if you'd comment on what seems to be the reason for the difference in performance, and then if there's anything that we could do just to strengthen the experience of students who don't get access to on-campus housing. So they just, I don't know what it is, networking, more supervision, I don't know, but I'm just wondering if a few of you could maybe comment on that issue.
Any Vice Chancellors, one of you want to, Vice Chancellor Olson-Loy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Regent Powell and members of the committee, I can give it a shot to get us started. I think we do a lot, do new student orientation to try to engage students who aren't living on campus and to help them build connections so they have the same access to peer leaders during those programs and are encouraged to keep in touch. I think we see those orientation group leaders in some ways as the sprinters who do really high intensity work in summer registration and then our orientation program in the fall. Our community advisors that are embedded in that residential life experience are there to be mentors and support for students through whatever comes up for them all the way through the year. And so if they talk about not feeling as connected on campus and having an interest in a student organization, there's somebody right there who knows how to get them linked in or who can see when they're struggling and ask them what's happening and then refer them to resources if it's a mental health issue or something else where a student might feel not as comfortable going forward as a new student. They also have a chance to meet other students and to build that sense of community and cohort and connection with the campus, and then just proximity to things. It's much easier for them to go to the dining hall, to go to the regional fitness center, to go to the library, to be connected with their faculty, et cetera. So So there are pieces that we could certainly reach out more, and some institutions that have a higher percentage of commuter populations do commuter-oriented programs. But it's hard to replace what happens, and also the learning that happens and the growth and development when you live with a group of people and go through that whole first-year transition on your own. And as you see with the data, it has lasting impact, right? Not just in the first year with the higher GPAs, but also that you're more likely to be retained and to graduate.
Chair Anderson and members of the committee, I would just like to tell you a little bit about Rochester. And because it's a mixed-use building where our students live, there's a quite large area that is student life activities for the entire campus. So a lot of the activities that all of the students get to participate in are right in that building. And we are, now that we're full with beds and things like that, we have students that want to come back now as juniors and live in student housing. And so that's very impressive to us to know that it is meeting a need. It's something that they're finding that does help them, retain them. And I think we'll probably be starting to look at some of the research that the other campuses have on the performance differences, because we know that the general research shows that students that live in student housing are much more successful.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Irwin, did you want to end this discussion right now?
I'd be happy to, Chair Anderson. Regent Powell, another strategy we've used is through our first-year experience course. So regardless of whether you live on campus or off campus, many students enroll in that class where they're going to get some of that same information. And every instructor of the course has a TA, a teaching assistant, who kind of serves in that peer mentor role. So that's a strategy that we've employed.
Thank you very much. You've been very good, been very helpful. I think we all learned a lot. And you were really neat. I had to laugh up here. You were raising your hand, and I just thought to myself, I wish my kids were raising their hands.
Such rule followers.
Yeah, the rule followers. Thank you very much. We'll get ready for the next one, which is we're going to learn about, and we're going to have some action on the amendments to the University of Minnesota Faculty Retirement Plan. While the speakers are stepping up to the table, maybe Senior Vice President Burnett would want to bring us up to speed on this.
So, members of the board, thank you, Regent Anderson. This was briefed to the board back in October that we need to make some changes, codification to our faculty retirement plan, errors that occurred in some cases decades ago, and we need to get these conformed and get the board to approve these modest changes to the retirement plan so we can get this done in this tax year. And Vice President Brown and Senior Director Horstman are here to answer any questions.
All right. Vice President Brown, Senior Director Horstman, if you want to go ahead and let us know.
Certainly, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, the board reserves to itself the authority to change the retirement plan. So this is really just a corrective action resolution. As we discovered some problems, we have a plan to resolve those, and we are simply asking the board to make a small modification to the plan to allow us to make those corrections.
Okay, I will ask, and I apologize, is there a resolution in our packet? Okay, I don't have my packet open right now, page 83. So I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of the proposed amendments to the University of Minnesota faculty retirement time.
Move it. Second.
It's moved and seconded. Do we want to have more discussion on this? We did discuss this, and we learned about the mistakes and things like that we're going to correct. Is there any more discussion on this? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Senior Director Horstman, I guess you can leave. You were very efficient. But I guess you can stay too. But the next one, it does say that Vice President Brown is taking care of our next item, which is a collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME Local 3937 and 3801 technical employees. Senior Vice President Burnett, do you want to introduce Vice President Brown again?
Well, Vice President Brown will walk you through. We are happy to present an agreement for your ratification, and Patty Dion from the Department of Human Resources is here as well.
So, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, I'm going to allow Senior Director of Employee Relations to share with you the details of this contract and explain it to you.
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, we are very pleased today to bring to you for your approval the labor agreement that we have negotiated with the Technical Employee Group, which is represented by AFSCME, and that's the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. I'd also like to just identify for you all that we also have here in the room today the president of the technical unit who works at the university. Mary Austin is right there in the front row in her green AFSCME shirt. There are 790 employees in this unit, and these employees work on all of our campuses and in our research and outreach centers. Some examples of the kind of work that is found in this unit include library assistants, lab technicians, information technology specialists, research plot technicians, child care teachers, sign language interpreters, and those are just a few of the many classifications. So it covers a broad array of work found in the university. What we are bringing to you today is a one-year contract which covers the time period from July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2018. This is a mature contract. AFSCME has represented the technical unit here at the university for 25 years. So this settlement is pretty straightforward. The negotiations focused primarily on wages, and this settlement consists of a 2% salary pool, which is consistent, as you have heard earlier in the afternoon, with the salary pool for our other employee groups. Employees in this technical unit receive pay in two ways. One way is through a movement of the pay range. The other is through the movement or progression of employees through that pay range. So our settlement is to move the pay range by 1%, and then we have also costed the progression of employees through the pay range, and the cost of that progression is also 1%. We did have a few agreements regarding language. We agreed to continue to meet with the union regarding issues related to a respectful workplace, and we updated our language regarding prohibited discrimination to include gender identity and gender expression to be consistent with our university-wide policies. So with that, we ask for your approval of this labor agreement.
Thank you, Senior Director. So this resolution is on page 88 of your docket. Hopefully you all have it out and can see it, which I can do this time. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to recommend approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded for the approval of resolution related to the proposed labor agreement with AFSCME Locals 3937 and 3801. Any discussion on this motion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move ahead to the next item on the agenda, and while the speakers are coming up, I will ask Senior Vice President Burnett to give us a little rundown on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today we bring forth a capital budget amendment on a golf practice facility for the Twin Cities Intercollegiate Athletic Department, and hopefully Mark Partridge, our interim university architect's coming forth, and I believe Athletic Director Coyle was also coming forth. We'll have this is for review today and for action in February. This facility is the campus staff and our system staff will lay forth, would be out on the St. Paul campus near the golf course and the soccer stadium, and they'll walk you through the project that is funded by donation. So with that, I turn it over to Athletic Director Coyle, and I don't think there's a PowerPoint for this. I think it's just in the document materials.
Oh, I see.
We're going to get some technical help.
Okay.
Well, there's a PowerPoint. Yep. Tom, did you break down?
I'll let you know. I had a question. Great. Thank you so much.
There it is.
So the interim university architect sitting in for the interim assistant vice president Gritters.
Yeah.
All right, Mr.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The purpose of this project is to construct a new year-round golf facility on the St. Paul campus, both for the men's and women's golf teams. The location is the Les Bolstead Golf Course on the site of the Tom Lehman practice facility, which is right next to the existing soccer stadium, if you're familiar with the area. And this location is going to consolidate outdoor and indoor practice, and so that'll increase the utilization of both the course and the golf teams. The proposed building has been sited to minimize impacts on the golf course, driving range, and the cross-country programs that cut through the golf course. And it's also neutral to any future golf course development. The scope of this project is very simple. It's a one-story, 5,000 square foot facility. It'll have enclosed hitting bays, an indoor chipping and putting area, locker rooms for the teams, which they do not have, some team meeting space, and shared coach offices. Scroll through these. So it is, again, a year-round facility, which they do not currently have. Locker rooms, team meeting space. This is a summary of the construction cost estimate and the funding source. So the reason we're here for a capital budget amendment is that we do have a donor gift that will be used to fund the project in full, $3,185,000. And the project schedule is quite aggressive. We would start design immediately with occupancy in late fall of 2018. At the time of the 2018 annual fiscal capital budget, funding hadn't been secured, so that's why we're here. Since that time, donor funding has been secured, and the project is seeking a capital budget amendment to allow the project to proceed with design and construction in advance of the 2019 fiscal capital budget. Happy to have any questions for either me or Mark.
Okay, so you're open for questions, and this is a review item. We won't have action on it today. I know
correct.
It's review action. Do we have action? Oh, we do have action on it today. No.
Review only? Just review today.
Just review.
Action in February.
Action, yeah, the next meeting. So that's what I thought. Sorry. A couple of my colleagues think they're pretty good golfers, so they're pretty interested in this project. So
Can't hurt.
Why are you looking at me, Mr.
Truth hurts. Anyway, let's. Anybody have any questions on this?
Mr. Chair.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the slide that's up right now, how do the operating costs for, and how many? You said how many square? 5,000. So about 20,000 a year. Am I tracking that right? And so the question. How does that compare to the current space? Is this 20,000 in new expenses, or is this, it currently costs 10,000 to maintain the space as it currently is, and so it's a marginal increase of about 10, hypothetically?
So the question is regarding the annual operating costs, and I'm assuming that is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but since there isn't such a facility today. Right. I'm assuming that's an estimate based on other academic or athletic facilities.
Mr. I'm
not sure I answered your question.
Well, I guess what I'm just looking at as we go forward with these, particularly in the non-revenue realm. If we raise the money, and I think this is wonderful, and it sounds to me like it's a great project across, I'm not questioning that at all. It would be wonderful if we knew that it's about 20 grand a year. What would it cost to endow the cost of the maintenance of it, so that it's not just coming out of Hyde, it's not coming out of some other program, or eventually coming out of what could be sent back to the institution. So just wondering if at some point we can get to the point where when we talk about adding a facility and it's going to have operational costs above what we're currently spending, that we identify an opportunity to keep it from just, again, pulling it out of the general budget. That was the basis of my question.
Sir, if you don't have an answer for that, I think Senior Vice President Burnett might on endowing.
Regent Rocha, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's it looks to be on a 5,000 square foot building, about 20,000 a year in operating. It would take about a $500,000 endowment to make that work. So it's certainly something that the athletic department can look at if there's a donor to do it. But otherwise, they're going to have to budget that 20,000 within next year's operating budget, and it's only a partial year. not opening till November. So we'll just have to, but it's certainly something they could talk with the donors about, because it's not a big, doesn't feel like a big lift to get an endowment to endow the operations of the building.
Just so I understand, so it would cost about $500,000 to endow the Thomas Anderson golf facility. If that's what you're telling me?
If he wants light and heat, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Regent Lucas.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, where do they practice now, and doesn't that have a cost?
Chair Anderson and Regent Lucas, yes, they right now they kind of a hodgepodge. They go to different indoor facilities to have practice during the winter months. There is a cost associated with that. Also, the student athletes have transportation costs. So obviously this facility will have a huge impact on our men's and women's golf programs being able to be close to campus. So that will help offset some of the differences. That's correct.
The question I have, would we have a chance to rent the facility out to other high school golf teams, golf leagues, or things to actually bring in revenue to also offset the costs?
Yeah, Chair Anderson, that's something that we are looking at. Due to NCAA rules, we have to be very cautious about high school golf teams, but that's something we've been working with Vice President Burnett and his staff to get the parameters on the facility to raise the money, but those are all options that we can look at as we move forward.
Okay. So the other thing, I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Burnett, who might want to turn it over to President Kaler. There was some I don't know, I'll just say misunderstanding. Some people think it's for review, some people think it's for action. Where are we on this? Where actually are we on this? Is it a review item just today, or is it a action item?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the committee's comfortable, it's a fully funded gift. It's not going to have a huge impact on schedule, but if the committee and the board is comfortable with moving it review action, we want to be very careful about that. It just gives our staff more time to get the design done and get this in the hands. The money's in hand from donors. The sooner we can get your approval, obviously, is better. And if the committee and the board is comfortable doing review action today, we would welcome that, yes.
Regent Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're actually going to talk a bit about this in governance and policy about review action, but this would be one of those circumstances where I think, unless there is hesitation on the part of any board member, I would move that we would approve the proposal today.
I'll second it.
Was that a motion, Regent Roche?
Yes, it was.
You moved in Regent second and second by Mr. Paul. Regent Lucas, you were going to say something? Okay. So now we have a motion on the table, and I would assume the motion says to go ahead and build the project. It's moved in second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Let's give the money back.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Athletic Director Coyle, how many years to a next golf championship?
Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu, we work hard every day to get that championship, so very fair.
Perfect. Okay, if there's no more, is there any more discussion? At this time, we're going to take a vote on appropriating we're going ahead with the new golf facility, I will say. I don't have that, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We're into the consent report. All right. Senior Vice President Burnett, do you want to take us into the consent report?
Sure. The consent report begins, and there is a revised consent report that's been distributed to the board. And President Kaler is going to also talk as we get to a piece of this, but just briefly, we brought in all the purchase of goods and services of $1 million. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on the governance committee, so this is kind of how that comes into play. But the employment agreements really was originally on page, let me see here, just trying to get to about 111 of your docket. And the first employment agreement for the consent agenda was for the Dean of the Medical School, and I think President Kaler was going to talk about that one. That was up first.
President Kaler?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I am seeking the committee's recommendation for full board approval for the appointment of Dr. Jacob Tolar as Dean of the Medical School and Interim Vice President for Health Sciences at the University of Minnesota. The Dean of the Medical School is responsible for advancing the university's academic, research, and outreach mission in the medical school, including collaboration between the Twin Cities and Duluth Medical School campuses for the Academic Health Center, the broader university, and affiliated clinical education settings across the state. The dean will also implement strategic and administrative alignment between the medical school and the University of Minnesota physicians, continue to develop the medical discovery teams, and ensure high-quality training. The interim vice president for health sciences is responsible for leading the university's health sciences agenda, working closely with the health sciences schools and colleges to advance strategic alignment and managing and accounting for critical resources of the AHC. These are big jobs, and we're reviewing whether one person can or should do both of them on a continuing basis in the climate around healthcare that we now are in. But it is important to take advantage of this opportunity of the transition to look at the entire AHC structure, and you know I'm interested in doing that. Now, if you have ever met Dr. Tolar, he surely has the energy to do just about anything. Simply put, he's an inspirational leader, an exceptional clinician, and internationally recognized for his research around regenerative medicine. He is now, among other positions, a distinguished McKnight Professor in the Department of Pediatrics, Bone Marrow Transplantation, and Director of the Stem Cell Institute. So without hesitation, I enthusiastically ask your recommendation to the full board for the appointment of Jacob Tolar as Medical School Dean and Interim Vice President for Health Sciences.
Thank you, President Kaler.
I'm finished, yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't know if you were. I thought you were.
I'm done.
So the other item on the consent report that we probably should have a little information on is the extension of football coach PJ Fleck's contract, and I'll ask Senior Vice President Burnett to give us some background.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll ask Athletic Director Coyle to come to the table. There are two amendments in the revised consent agenda for the employment agreement for the head football coach on the Twin Cities campus. And Athletic Director Coyle can talk about, there's two parts to this, an extension and an amendment to the existing agreement.
Correct. Chair Anderson and members of the board, we felt it was important after this first season to show our commitment to Coach Fleck, to show a commitment to our student athletes and our fans that we're committed to this program in the direction that we're moving in. So we offered PJ a one-year contract extension. There is no raise in that extension, so his contract would be for 5 more years. It's based off the same terms, what his salary would be and so forth for the next 5 years. And we made that decision based, as I said, we wanted to make sure we illustrated a commitment to Coach Fleck, our football program, and our fans. And second, if you recall, when we made this decision to hire Coach Fleck a year ago, we talked about the impact that he has athletically, academically, and socially. And if you look at what our program did, obviously athletically we want to have more wins. Every program wants to have more wins. But academically, the first semester he was ahead of our program. We posted our highest grade point average ever as a football program, above a 3.0. I think we were 3.07. We followed that up in the summer with our highest grade point average during the summer term. Socially, we did several things in the community, whether it be our student athletes going to the Macy Iron Children's Hospital, whether we do the diaper drive during fall camp, the turkey drive, and these were all things that were initiated by the students in that program. So we're very pleased with what he's done, and that's why we offered that extension pending this approval. In addition, we wanted to clarify in this current agreement, Coach Fleck for recruiting has the opportunity to utilize private charter time, and we've been able to successfully fundraise dollars earmarked specifically for fundraising. So we just wanted to bring to the attention of the board that he has up to 60 hours, and when we pass that 60-hour mark of private airtime, we would utilize privately fundraised dollars to offset those costs. And those are two amendments that we'd like to bring forward to the board.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do at this time is get the motion for the consent report on the table, and then we can discuss any parts of it.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second? Second, Regent Hsu. Okay, we can have a discussion. Anybody want to discuss the consent report? Regent Hsu.
Just first of all, a question on Dr. Tolar's contract. If in fact he does become the Vice President of the Academic Health Center in the future, are we talking about increasing, would there be an increase associated with that, or is this kind of the salary for both positions?
I guess President Kaler.
Barry Anderson, Regent Hsu. As it is today, I would not anticipate increasing his salary to reflect taking that job permanently. Frankly, I also feel pretty strongly that it will be a very redefined job from what it is today.
Thank you. And then
Regent Chu, you want to follow up on that?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. No, I'm good on that one. Athletic Director Coyle, maybe a question for you. I personally don't see the need to require fundraising dollars for the additional airplane time. If he needs additional airplane time to go out and recruit, and it's okay with you and your budget, then I don't know that there should be a restriction on whether or not we have the funds coming in from somewhere else. I mean, does anyone else have a thought on that?
Athletic Director Coyle, do you want to try to clarify that, or?
No, Chair Anderson and Regent Chu, thank you for the question. I think we just wanted to bring to the board's attention, again, his contract states that he has up to 60 hours. We anticipate that he will go over 60 hours, and we just wanted to make sure in full transparency that we all understood that when he does go over 60 hours, we do have fundraised dollars that could cover that cost.
And there probably is, this is my question, there probably is a discretionary item on your part if you ever want to do that too for X amount more. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, sir.
So we already have what Regent Chu says, yeah. Okay. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, a comment about Dr. Toller. Highly support the motion to hire him and his position. The one thing that impressed me about Dr. Toller, among many, is I had an opportunity to see him work over the legislature and talk about a number of issues, and his ability to communicate very complicated medical, scientific issues to members of the legislature was absolutely stellar. And that is a huge thing for us at this time and going forward. Second of all, I heard him speak about 3-4 weeks ago to a full room of folks. And again, he was stellar in his comments, and he takes very complicated issues, medical issues, and makes them understandable to the listening audience. So highly support that effort. Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions, Athletic Director Coyle, about the Second Amendment having to do with the aircraft. So I understand, is under the policy that the head football coach can use private aircraft up to 60 hours. Is that correct? And are those 60 hours, are they donated by individuals or corporate, or they come out of the budget?
Chair Anderson, Regent Johnson, that's part of his contract. So in his contract, his employment agreement with the University of Minnesota, he has up to 60 hours to use private aircraft for recruiting purposes only, and that's part of our budget.
So that's not, for instance, a corporation has private jet, they couldn't call you or call him, and that he could use that private jet to fly to Florida or to Texas. I'm trying to understand how that works.
Yeah, Athletic Director Coyle.
Yeah, Chair Anderson, Regent Johnson, yes, we do have some donors who will donate their aircraft to him to go recruiting, for recruiting purposes, that we can take those opportunities as well.
So, Mr. Chair, that's reportable and transparent. Who does that? What corporation, what individual?
Athletic Director Coyle.
Yeah. Chair Anderson and Regent Johnson, we track every time our coaches go out on a private aircraft, we track who's using it, who provided the aircraft, and how it was covered. So yes, we track that.
Mr. Chairman, and this is outside what we're talking about, but I'm curious, do other head coaches have the same opportunity in matters of recruiting of aircraft?
Athletic Director Coyle.
Yes, sir. Chair Anderson, Regent Johnson, here at the University of Minnesota are peer institutions. Other coaches at Minnesota have the opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, here at Minnesota.
Chair Anderson, Regent Johnson, yes. So Coach Patino in his contract has the opportunity to use private aircraft, and that's very consistent with our peers across the Big Ten as well. So other coaches do have the opportunity to use private aircraft for recruiting.
One last question, Mr. Chairman. It has to do with taxes. If you're a corporation or an individual and you make your aircraft available, is that a tax deduction, or depends upon we're talking about present tax law or what's to come in the future?
I think we could ask Athletic Director Coyle, but he's probably not a CPA and qualified to answer that. President Kaler.
Regent Anderson, I'm not a CPA either, but I stayed at a It's late. I'm jet lagged. This is an interesting conversation Regent Chu and I had with Gail Klatt, Auditor Klatt, at lunch today. And my current understanding is that a donor who makes that service available if it is done in a way in which we can provide them a receipt for that donation, that is a acceptable deduction for that individual or corporation. That's my current understanding. I would not do that on your tax return without verifying it with an expert, but I believe that to be true.
And I would just add that in the cases of recruiting, a coach is not using it for personal use, it's for business use, so there's no reportable there. Next, Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comment, question, and comment. The first comment, echoing the sentiments with respect to Dr. Tolar. I'm very excited to see him moving forward in this capacity. Certainly knows the medical school very well, and I've always been impressed with his capacity, and I'm very interested in his perspective on how to sort of move forward with creating that position as it relates to the academic health. The question, and I'm not entirely clear on this air travel, but the first question is 60 hours plus? Are we kind of giving our personnel? I know others have access. Is it access to the same amount, or are some folks with more? Because when you look at the number of recruits because it's a huge program, right? 100-some folks. Are those enough hours? I mean, a 1-hour flight both ways, you get 30 of them, right? And so, is that enough for us to be successful? Because we got a pretty substantial investment in this program.
Athletic Director Coyle.
Chair Anderson, Regent Roche, are you talking specifically for the football program?
Yes, correct.
We feel like, and that's why we wanted to bring this to the board today, was to have this conversation. Again, his contract clearly states up to 60 hours. We will go past that 60 hours. That's where we got the fundraised dollars to cover that. As you know, it's very well publicized. Right now we have a recruiting class that's ranked in the top 25 in the country. We have 6 4-star recruits. It would be, if they all sign on December 20th, our most highly decorated recruiting class in program history. So obviously, this is the first year of our early signing period due to changes in the NCAA signing date. And so you're seeing a more aggressive timetable at the private uses of aircraft right now, as opposed to when signing day was in the first Tuesday of February. And so we feel comfortable with the 60 hours, but again, we just wanted to be fully transparent. So if you saw reports that it was over 60 hours, how we were covering that cost.
All right. Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up on that, because when I hear that, it certainly seems to be a legitimate expenditure when you consider the way programs run these days. And when I hear you've raised philanthropy dollars, I start to think, well, maybe those retiring some Athletes Village debt or something might be, and unless they're earmarked for it by the donors, and just simply take this out of the program, that would seem reasonable to me. But maybe there's something that prevents that from happening.
That brings up another item. You do get donors that earmark dollars, and in this case, are we getting earmarked dollars to offer for recruiting?
Chair Anderson and Regent Rocha, yes, sir. These are people who've made gifts specifically for football recruiting, so they're restricted gifts.
Right, and then, Mr. Chair, if I may, just final point, with respect to the extension of the coach's contract, when the call came in, just inquiring for initial feedback for doing this, my response is pretty simple. It's the one thing that we can't really have, it seems, is turnover. And having that consistency and being able to reflect to the next generation of Gophers, among other programs, we need to show that there is that commitment, right? Somebody wants to come in knowing that someone is going to be there through their process, because they're really creating a relationship with the coach as much as they are with the institution, it seems. So from that standpoint, it seems to be, there's obviously a lot of public opinion about these things. There always are, but people, would that people be so interested in the dormitories at our system campuses as they are about these issues. But I would say that I do want to just, one point is, when we had the conversation a year ago, in year plus, or about a year ago, about making this investment in this new direction for the program, we have expectations. I asked some very specific questions and saying, well, if we make this substantial increase in investment in our leadership staff for the football program, how will that yield for the institution? At what point are we going to turn the corner so that rather than having to subsidize your department, we actually would have additional resources for the institution? I don't think we got there this year. I think when we look at some of the increases in sale tickets and so on and so forth, we're not we're not where I was hoping we would be at this point, but that by no means suggests that we're not on the right, track yet. But just bearing in mind that I think it's important for this board, as we ask those questions and make decisions based on those assumptions, that we keep those in front of us. So my expectation would be that we continue down this path. Certainly, as you discussed, the national attention we're getting for the success of this class would hopefully portend success in the future. But there is an accountability that we make that investment based on your expertise, and we want to make sure that we're making progress as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Sviggum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a 45-second comment, if I could, because I'm sure, like many of you have heard things in the local communities about the contract extension. Just to enhance what Athletic Director Coyle has stated in regards to the commitment, I think this is a very important commitment, something we need to do as a university. It's hard for us sometimes to relate as citizens, farmers, whoever, to big-time football coaching. But this is big time, and it's somewhat tough for us to relate. But this guy, meaning the coach, Fleck, does things the right way, folks. He does it the right way. Whether it's out on the football field with the athletes handing the ball to the official, whether it's the students, athletes sitting in the front row with collared shirts on, or visiting children's hospitals, as you mentioned, he does it the right way, and we need to make a commitment. And thank you, Mr. Coyle, for doing it.
Thank you. It's great to hear from a slow safety from St. Olaf.
Half a second short.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to pass the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
That last comment you made, I can attest to that because I worked for St. Olaf College and Regent Sviggum played real slow.
So we do have, thank you. We do have a motion on the table to accept the consent agenda. We've talked about it, consent report, I should say. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the consent report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Information items to wrap up the meeting. Senior Vice President Brian Burnett.
We do have one information item that's in a form of a report, and I would invite Executive Director Darrell Peel to talk about our annual report on targeted business, urban community economic development, and small business programs. We have a presentation that begins on what I believe was page 137 of your slide deck. And welcome Executive Director Peel.
Director Peel, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you much, and to the Board of Regents. I'm really pleased, proud, and just excited to be in front of you this morning. I want to preface the comments about the data with a little information about the success of the program. We're really proud of the relationship that the Office of Business, Community, and Economic Development has forged with CAPM and with the Office of Procurement, and together we've become what I believe is quite the team, and we're really, really proud. And so the greatest measure of that is when someone outside of the organization recognizes the work. And so in 2017, we had the great fortune of being recognized as the Corporate Partner of the Year by the Women's Business Development Center, which is a certifying agency for Wisconsin, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota. And it oversees the supplier diversity relationships between organizations, institutions, and major corporations with women. And we were selected as the Corporate Partner of the Year because of our increased utilization and spend with women business enterprises, which is a huge accomplishment. A couple months later, we had the good fortune of being recognized again. We were selected as the 2017 Corporation of the Year by the North Central Minority Supplier Development Council, which serves Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. The folks we were involved in the competition with are 3M and Target and Cargill and all the other major corporations in these 5 and 6 state areas. So it was a huge honor, and we were very, very, very proud. And it would not have happened without what I believe is an incredible relationship that is growing and has grown between CAPM, between procurement, and the Office of Business, Community, and Economic Development. With that said, I would like to share with you part of the reason why we were selected. First, in 2016-17, the University of Minnesota increased its utilization with targeted businesses, which are women, minorities, and disabled persons, by $11.2 million. And that was $11.2 million over 2015-2016, and which was, we thought, an incredible feat because in 2015-2016, we had increased by $11.5 million. So over the last 2 years, we've increased by $22 million. Actually, it's $22,999,000. Almost $23 million increase in just the last 2 years. And third, that's a 3.39% increase. And in 2016-2017, that total dollar figure was $82,559,000, and the year before was $71 million. When you look around the community and look around the greater Twin Cities area, our success at the University of Minnesota and using targeted businesses is unparalleled. We are truly the benchmark organization as it relates to supplier diversity among corporations, institutions, and universities in the state of Minnesota and in the region. As we look at the data as well, I'd like to just share with you a couple things. There are some trends, and the trend data is that we've had a huge increase in utilization of target businesses, and we've had a significant increase in utilization of total spend with women. Our only challenge has been with our increase in the utilization of spend with minorities, which has gone down. But I will share this with you. When you look at the utilization of women and minority-owned businesses, it ebbs and flows according to the projects and the opportunities that are available. And so some years you will have an incredible amount of spend, and other years you will have what looks like a deficit. And while our detractors will say all of a sudden we've lost interest in utilization of working with minorities businesses, it's not true. There's different challenges. For example, in the last year, there was a couple major projects. One of them was a small $700 million project called the State Capitol Project, which pulled a great number of minority and women-owned businesses into that major project. And we had just lost a good number in the U.S. Bank Stadium project. So we're competing with what is a ever-shrinking number of minority-owned businesses with capacity and scale to meet the needs of the university. But even and still with that, which I'm really proud of, we've had a $22 million increase in utilization over the last 2 years, which means we've been methodical and intentional and very laser focused on trying to grow our spend. Matter of fact, Tim Bray and I talk regularly and daily on strategy on how we can continue to increase our spend in a way in which helps the university find minority-owned and women-owned businesses who can bring cost savings and innovation to our supply chain process. With that, we're pretty excited about the future, and you have the reports, so I won't read the reports to you, but what I will say is that I'm really proud that in this first quarter already for this year in construction, we have a 39% utilization, and for the past 10 years we've stayed around 30% in utilization on construction projects at the University of Minnesota, so we're really proud of that. And also in relationship to some of the ebbs and flows in the utilization of vendors, one of the things that we look forward to, because we know that historically women-owned and minority-owned and disabled-owned businesses, especially in the construction trades, really have more activity, and we have greater spend with them toward the end of the projects because they're in the final finishes portion of it. You know, more specifically, they do more electrical and those types of things. And when you think about the buildings and the projects that we have still on the table, it makes sense when you analyze the data that we still have Tate Lab, Athletes Village, Bell Museum, all who are closing, and Pioneer Hall, which we're just starting. So we're pretty excited, really excited about the utilization. The numbers have been fantastic, and I want to insult your intelligence, and I know I'm probably standing between you and dinner. So if there are any questions you have about the program, our growth, or where we want next, I'm here.
I have a brief question. I think Regent Powell does too. My question is, it looks like you're doing a wonderful job. So is it when you talk about these projects that are closing and the minority businesses and the women businesses, a lot of times we hire people at the closing of these projects because they're smaller companies? Is that a fair statement?
It's actually the types of services and industries that they're in. A lot of times, you know, if you have the major construction companies like a Mortenson's or a McGough or whatever, and in the front end of that process, they're organizing, supervising, and building the building. But the final finishes are the drywall, the electrical, and those things are a lot of where you have more of your women and minority-owned businesses. Even have large capacity and large scale. They're not necessarily always small, but they come in and those are where they more specialize in than the major bricks and sticks portion.
At the end of the project.
Right.
Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and Director Peel. So all of the spending is with Minnesota-based contractors, or some of it outstate, or how does it break down that way?
Very little is outstate. In our last estimate, I really wish I'd brought that data with you, because I'm that guy that always says information without data's opinion. But we really are around 90, 93, and 94% of our utilization and our spend with minority-owned and women-owned vendors are from the state of Minnesota. Great. And in our office, one of our philosophies is let's think Minnesota first.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Peel? Representative Chen.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you for the presentation. This is great work for these targeted business and small business. I wonder if there's any other groups that we might want to target to do business with. That's one question. The other one is that do we have something similar to such as vendor code of conduct that we advocate doing business with companies, suppliers, vendors that have high standard of labor standard or environmental compliance or other non-discrimination? Do we have such statement or things like that? Thank you.
Yeah, most certainly. So that's about 3 questions. So let me start with, I guess the first thing I would say is, yes, we do have aspirations to grow the numbers and the populations of targeted businesses that we actually engage. One of the conversations we've been having with the state is we would like to see, and from my experientially from every supplier diversity program I've ever ran, veterans were always a part of that conversation. So we've already started, me and Mr. Bray, working with collecting data on the numbers of suppliers who are registered with us who are actually veteran-owned businesses, so that when the state makes that move, we're out in front. We're not waiting or trying to build an infrastructure to be able to move forward. The other greater population of individuals who we've had inquiry about adding are the LGBT community. And again, so we've built relationships with the National Certification Agency and then invited them to our Expo and Outreach program so that they can have conversations with individuals who aspire to have certification with them. However, we are pretty much married to trying to stay lockstep with what the state and the federal government is doing as it relates to who are those targeted businesses or protected classes without creating, lanes of our own. We try to, but we're in preparation for that. I think the other question, your other question was?
Code of conduct. I thought it was one about code of conduct for...
Yeah. Do we actively advocate for, doing business with companies with higher standards?
I wish I could have a code of conduct for some of our businesses, that majority of businesses that we do work with. No, but what we do have we have expectations in terms of workforce. And so we have on all of our workforce, all of our major construction projects, Sharon Banks, who works in our office, is engaged in going and doing site visits to make sure that we are in lockstep, again, with the administrative code from the state of Minnesota that states that you would use particular percentages of individuals who are minority, who are women and disabled on those work sites. And I'm really proud to say the University of Minnesota has been successful in meeting those goals, right? So in terms of code of conduct, I think that's the most rigid type of measure we have as it relates to organizational behavior, on a work site. Is the measure of utilization of the workforce. Other than that, we are not really a depository or a or ombuds kind of organization for complaints or difficulties that women and minorities are having on those sites. And to date, since I've only been here 3 going on 4 years, I've really not had any brought to us. So in terms of following up on those types of behavioral type things, not really in our space.
Thank you, Director Peel. And any more questions of Director Peel? If not, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for being here. Finally, our information items as we continue. In your packet, you'll find information on the Super Bowl planning, quarterly asset management report, purchasing report, the capital planning project report. Senior Vice President Burnett is here to answer any questions if you have on those. If you don't, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
So moved. Second? Adjourned.
Very good.